Chapter 39:56. Lin Miao was trembling with anger. The guard was slandering the Lin family in broad daylight. She didn't even dare to look at the contemptuous gazes of the commoners around her. What right did these commoners have to look down on the young mistress of the Rome city's Lin family? How preposterous! Who did they think they were? They were just a bunch of worthless ants that could be trampled on like ants. She was the young mistress of the Lin family. With the Lin family's current development and status, it was only a matter of time before they replaced the Shi family. How dare these people treat her like this? Lin Miao was trembling with anger as she glared at the rowdy crowd. Shut up, all of you. Don't shout. Shut up. The commoners felt a wave of fear when they saw her murderous expression. Some of the more timid ones naturally shut their mouths. You're spouting nonsense. Lin Miao glared at An Wuxia, finding her utterly detestable. If it weren't for the secret guards sent by Mo Yen holding her down, she would have jumped up and pounced on Princess Wuxia to tear her apart. Arbor glanced at the woman in disgust. The Rome city's Lin family had only moved to the imperial capital for a few months, but they had already committed so many crimes that even the heavens couldn't tolerate it. Princess Wuxia couldn't be bothered with her. She waved her hand and said to the secret guard, since the Lin family doesn't know how to educate their child, take her to their doorstep and return her to the Lin family. Supervise them and make sure they don't mess around in the imperial capital. How dare you? Lin Miao's eyes were almost spitting fire. Her entire body was trembling as she suddenly screamed, You! Let go of me! Let go! Let go! Ah! Her hands were tied up with ropes, and Lin Miao was pushed forward. She stumbled a few steps forward in a sorry state. Who are you? Who are you? How dare you? Lin Miao was trembling with anger and couldn't speak a complete sentence. A commoner beside her immediately looked at her with disdain and said proudly, You don't even know our Princess Wuxia. That's right. Princess Wuxia is the heroine of our borders. Who do you think you are? How dare you yell at our Princess Wuxia? Lin Miao was furious, and her cold eyes stared at the three people who had mocked her. That gaze made it seem as if he wanted to eat them alive. The commoners couldn't help but tremble. His sharp and terrifying gaze made them all shut their mouths, not daring to say another word. On the other side, An Wuxia had already asked An Yang to get the medicine and went to comfort the frightened mother and son. She waved her hand and ordered An Yang, take her home. Let me go, let me go. Lin Miao snapped. But who would care about her feelings? The secret guard dragged her along while An Yang led the way. The two of them dragged the screaming woman all the way back to the Lin family. On the other hand, An Wuxia walked to Mo Yen in Arbor with a chuckle and reached out to grab the little stoic's small hand in a clumsy manner. Younger sister, this is the first time we've met. I've embarrassed myself in front of you. What sister? Mo Yen glared at her. Call me sister-in-law. Humph. An Wuxia pursed her lips and then grabbed Arbor's small hand while beaming from ear to ear. Sister-in-law, look at brother's fierce appearance. You must help me teach him a good lesson. Arbor pursed her lips and shook her head honestly. I'm helping husband. An Wuxia's small face fell. Chapter 39:57. Heavens, this little fellow looked dazed, adorable, and incomparably exquisite, but he didn't expect her to be a scoundrel. As expected of Mo Yen's wife, she was as scoundrelly as him. No wonder they could become a couple. An Wuxia couldn't resist rolling her eyes at the young couple. My life is hard. I was bullied by eldest brother in the past, and now even sister-in-law won't help me. Mo Yen's lips turned up slightly. He was in an extremely good mood as he held Arbor's small hand and left An Wuxia with an annoying back view. If my wife doesn't help me, who will she help? Get married, of course. After you get married, you'll have one more person to help you. Marrying is also fine. Mo Lien chuckled. Third Fu probably won't mind. And Wushuang was thoroughly choked, and then she snorted. The little stoic looked curiously at her husband, her meaning obvious. What past did this commandery Princess Wushuang have with third young Sir Fu? It's a long story. Mo Lien chuckled lightly. He's a gifted scholar and a peerless beauty, but this pair, heh, and Wushuang's charming face darkened, and she said nastily, shut up. Mo Lien winked at the little fellow with an expression that said, I'll tell you when we get home. The eyes of the gossipy Qiao lit up, and she nodded, exchanging a look with her husband in tacit understanding. Hey! And Wushuang was exasperated. Don't think she didn't see the exchange of looks between the young couple. How did she, the dignified commandery Princess Wushuang, become the target of other young couples' gossip, damn it. Brother, I'm telling you to shut up. You're not allowed to talk nonsense in front of my sister-in-law. You're ruining my reputation. Ignore her, Mo Lien muttered quietly and turned to walk towards Wei Ziqin. Mom, let's go back first. Wei Ziqin nodded with a smile, sweeping away her bad mood from earlier. She held her daughter's hand and said, Mom made your favorite 4 happiness dumplings for you. The little girl's eyes lit up. She turned around and looked at the bitter Princess Wushuang. She coughed lightly and said, shall we go together? Princess Wushuang immediately ran over and nodded. She glared at Mo Lien and said, okay. Wei Ziqin smiled and said, please, your highness. Auntie, you don't have to be so polite. Just call me Wushuang. The news that Princess Wushuang had taught Miss Lin a lesson on the street and sent her home spread all over the capital in less than half a day. Everyone applauded. After all, the Lin family had never done anything good ever since they came to sovereign capital. Now, he was like a rat crossing the street, and everyone was yelling at him non-stop. Family head Lin sat in the main hall with a face full of anger, glaring at the 2 men in black standing in the main hall of his family. He had already figured out the identities of these 2 people. One of them was one of the Crown Prince's secret guards. He was a level 10 divine master and was most likely a member of the Purple Forest Guard. The other was one of Princess Wushuang's guards. His name was Yang, and he spoke in a methodical manner. Although his face was expressionless, the words that came out of his mouth made people feel stifled. Things like, I'm here on the orders of the princess to send your daughter home, and, I hope your manner will discipline her well. Don't let her out to scare people. Patriarch Lin was infuriated just by hearing those words. Patriarch Lin, I hope you will discipline your family well, Yang said coldly. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the outer hall. He saw several Purple Forest Guards escorting a disheveled man out, supporting a frightened young woman whose hairpins were disheveled. Dalong! Patriarch Lin shouted angrily and turned to look at the uninvited guests. Chapter 3958. You. The Lin family head glared at the men who were grabbing Lin Dalong and snapped, who are you? Actually, he already had an idea in his heart. To be able to get in and out of the Lin family so quickly and directly pull his son out, he was definitely not an ordinary person. What he didn't expect was that the Crown Prince's men would arrive so quickly. The Lin family head glared hatefully at his son, exasperated at his failure to live up to his expectations. Now that the rumors outside had spread like wildfire, no matter how wealthy he was, he had no choice but to avoid the brunt of it. A Purple Forest Guard cupped his hands and said coldly, we've received news that your son raped a woman. The people from the capital office will be here soon. Lin family head, please pack up and hand your son over to the capital office. Lin Dalong twisted his body and shouted angrily, you dare, you. Father, save me, father. The Lin family head was so angry that smoke rose from his head. He gripped the armrest tightly and shot to his feet. He glanced at his daughter, who was being held to the side, and then at his son, who had been dragged out. The Lin family head's old face was filled with anger. "Everyone, let's talk this out." The purple forest guard didn't bother to waste time with them. He waved his hand and had the weeping woman sent out. He then turned to the Lin family head and said, "Lin family head, please cooperate." "Father, father." Lin Dalong was being escorted out the door. He stretched his head and shouted, "Father, father, save me, father." Chaotic footsteps could be heard coming from the door. The Lin family head looked up and saw Chao Jiedo from the capital office rushing in with a group of people. He waved his hand and took Lin Dalong away without saying a word. "Take him away!" Chao Jiedo shouted angrily. He didn't even look at the gloomy Lin family head as he ordered his men to kidnap Lin Dalong and leave. The Lin family head cursed in anger. He turned and saw his daughter, Lin Miao, stand up with a wronged expression. He raised his hand and slapped her. "You evil creature! If it weren't for this evil creature causing trouble, how could others target the Lin family and find out so many things in just a few minutes?" Lin Miao had already been wronged, and now that she was slapped, she burst into tears. Madame Lin's heart ached as she stepped forward to hug her daughter. She turned her head and complained, "Master, why did you hit her?" "Miao, didn't do it on purpose. If it weren't for this evil creature, how would the Lin family be in so much trouble?" The head of the Lin family scolded angrily, "Go back to your own court immediately and reflect on your mistakes. Think clearly about what you have done wrong." "Master." Madame Lin comforted him gently, "Don't be angry. Since Dalong has been taken to the capital office, there's still room for negotiation. Let's go beg His Highness King Jing first." Master Lin's expression softened slightly. He glanced at Madame Lin and said, "You and Madame Su are cousins, and you usually get along well. I'll have to trouble you to mediate Dalong's matter. Look at what the patriarch is saying." Madame Lin smiled sweetly. "Although Dalong isn't my biological son, you must know how I've treated him over the years. Now that something has happened to Dalong, as his mother, if I don't take responsibility for him, who else can?" The head of the Lin family grunted. He turned back to look at Lin Miao, His gaze fell on her swollen mouth, and he was furious. He snorted heavily. "Don't make a fool of yourself at Princess Consort Zheng's birthday in a few days." Chapter 3959. Father. Lin Muir stomped her feet in anger. Madame Lin tugged at her, winked at her, and pulled her back. After the head of the Lin family left, she pinched her daughter and said, "Really, your father is angry, why did you go and talk back to him? Big brother caught a bitch himself. What does this have to do with me? He was the one who was indiscreet and gave the capital office something to use against him." All right, all right." Madame Lin patted her hand lovingly and poked her with a finger. "You should control your temper in the future. Don't you know who those people are? Why do you dare to provoke them? That Princess Wushuang is the only daughter of King Jinyuan." "Who is King Jinyuan?" "He is a brother of His Majesty's who has been through life and death situations. 17 years ago, when King Fulin rebelled, King Jinyuan was in the north and helped His Majesty stabilize the situation. He is a meritorious official. Princess Wushuang also went to the battlefield at the age of 13 and is an invincible female warrior. You can provoke anyone, but you have to provoke such a person." Madame Lin couldn't help but sigh. "You really have to control your temper in the future. Mother only has one daughter, you can't let anything happen to you." Madame Lin patted her daughter's hand. Lin Muir curled her lips and covered her aching mouth. "Isn't that an Wushuang also a bully? How dare she treat me like this because of His Majesty's favor?" "All right," Madame Lin said helplessly. "Go find a doctor to fix your teeth in the next 2 days, and tidy up your makeup. 3 days later, come with mother to attend Princess Zheng's birthday. There are so many young talents in the imperial capital, there must be one who is suitable for my daughter. Lin Muir blushed, stamping her feet. But father said I'm not allowed to go out. Your father does whatever he wants, you just have to prepare well. Mother will persuade him. Lin Muir nodded happily. Thank you, mother. Arbor sat in his little courtyard. After accompanying the family for a meal, he watched Xiaosun practice writing for a while. This little rascal had never been a normal person. After writing for a while, he would sneak glances at her. He saw her sitting at the side and flipping through a medical book. Xiao Sen's small and lousy handwriting was crooked. Mo Lien looked at him speechlessly. Don't you have equestrian and archery lessons this afternoon? Go earlier. Xiao Sen hurriedly threw away his pen as if he had been granted amnesty. After bidding farewell to his sister and brother-in-law in a hurry, he ran out like a bird that had been released from its cage. Arbor rolled her eyes at her husband and said in annoyance, "You're always indulging him." In his previous life, this kid had been raised to be a playboy, so in this life, Arbor had repeatedly told his parents to discipline him strictly. Mo Lien giggled as she sat beside her. She held her little hand and said, Xiaosen is still young. Teach him slowly. Arbor flipped a page of his book and looked up. I told mother that I'll be in seclusion at home for the next few days. I'll be going to the main planet in a bit. The little fellow said aloofly, I need absolute silence. Refining a resurrection pill above her level was no joke. If she failed, she might even suffer a bit of a backlash from the pill. Okay. Mo Lien nodded. I'll take those 3 puppies with me. I definitely won't let them disturb you. The little stoic grunted in response. After eating snacks in the afternoon, Arbor entered the main planet. Just as he left, a mechanical bird flapped its wings and landed on the windowsill. See you tomorrow. Chapter 3960. At that moment, Mo Lien was carrying 3 little puppies that were running around in the courtyard into the house. Suddenly, she saw the mechanical bird that appeared on the windowsill. Her eyes flickered slightly, and she poked the bird lightly with her finger. The bird's beak opened and closed, and Yun Piaomiao's voice emerged from within. Student Xiao, I hope you can return to school immediately. I have an extremely important matter to discuss with you. Mo Lien knitted his brows as he gazed over quietly. The mechanical bird completed its task and flew out from the windowsill. It flapped its 2 wooden wings and flew further and further away in the twilight. Eventually, it turned into a small black dot and disappeared into the horizon. Although Yun Piaomiao was not very reliable, he would not send a mechanical bird to find the couple over some trivial matters. This meant that Dean Yun indeed had something important to discuss with his wife. But Mo Lien pinched the green vine in his sleeve and entered Paradise Planet. He left the 3 little puppies behind and circled around the stool where he disappeared, barking angrily. Crown Prince. Chio and Little Water Droplet hopped over in a very flattering manner, tugging at his clothes and calling out repeatedly, Crown Prince. Mo Lien's mouth twitched, and he bent down to pick up the 2 little ones from the ground. Where are they? Little Two and the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal brought everyone to Peak Planet to mine. Mo Lien, haha, Rotten Peach Blossom is very proactive. Crown Prince, why did you come in? It's nothing. Mo Lien cast a glance into the distance before lowering his eyes after testing it out. We can't enter the main planet. Yes, we can't enter the main planet. Little Water Child said in a childish voice. Before Master went in, she told us that she would need a certain amount of time inside. Yes, the fastest would be 3 days. Mo Lien furrowed his brows and pondered. He then left Paradise Planet. When the 3 puppies saw him suddenly appear, they were filled with righteous indignation and pounced on him, biting his robe and barking in protest. Don't make a fuss. Mo Lien pressed the space between his brows as he carried those 3 little ones to the table and patted their heads. There was something fishy about this. Yun Piaomiao wouldn't send them a message for no reason. Hui Feng. A dark figure suddenly appeared at the window and bared his white teeth at the crown prince. Master, did you forget again? Hui Feng was personally ordered by you to be sent to Huiping village to open a mine. Otherwise, she would have returned to the capital with third young Master Fu. Poor Hui Feng. He didn't know how he'd offended his master again. Xiao Yi secretly shed a tear of sympathy for him from the bottom of his heart, but that was it. His Highness, it seemed like Hui Feng had offended him. Humph, he ordered him to lead a group of brats from the Purple Forest Guard to open that holy meridian in Huiping village. But in order to ensure their safety, he had already ordered Venerable Immortal Jin Shang, Zhao Sheng, and Liang Yi to assist them. With Venerable Immortal Jin Shang, a peak Venerable Immortal, protecting Hui Feng and the others, there shouldn't be any major problems. Mo Lien thought for a moment before saying to Xiao Yi, have the people from the Night Pavilion go to the Imperial Academy's Yun Piaomiao to scout for information. I don't know what matter requires the Crown Princess to personally handle. Yes. Xiao Ye's expression was solemn as he responded and immediately left to handle the matter. Mo Lien frowned slightly, and a trace of irritation inexplicably rose in her heart. Chapter 3961. Couldn't Yun Piaomiao say a few more words? What a troublemaker. Mo Lien frowned. His hand was touched by the three little things, and he came back to his senses. He casually took some meat and tore it to feed them. He muttered, I wonder if Jojo is doing well. Your Highness. Tong appeared at the door. Mo Lien nodded. Is there any news? A hint of hesitation appeared on Tong's face. If you have something to say, just say it. Yes. Tong nodded and then said, the second day after Prince Chen returned to Tsang province, he went to the Imperial Mausoleum on Lonely Mountain and hasn't left the mountain since. Imperial Mausoleum? Mo Lien was shocked. Who is it? Prince Chen's mother passed away. Mo Lien was startled. Why so suddenly? Yes. This subordinate found out that Prince Chen received the news of his mother's burial the second day after he returned, and he rushed to Lonely Mountain on the same day. What else did you find out? Mo Lien's expression changed slightly. This brat, don't let anything happen to him, Xiao Qiao is worried. Our men are moving very carefully in the Phoenix Monarch City. Emperor Tsang has spies all over the world, and they will be caught by him if they aren't careful. Tong lowered his head. That's all we found for now. It said that Prince Chen cried for 3 days and nights in Lonely Mountain and then fainted. Mo Lien, exclamation point. Have our men contact him and see if there's anything we can help with. Yes. Tong didn't say anything and only lowered his eyes. In the end, the men they sent to Phoenix Emperor City were spies of the enemy kingdom. Now that His Highness the Crown Prince was willing to sacrifice these men to help Prince Chen, it was clear that they were close. The situation on Duan Yu's side definitely wouldn't be as easy as his. As soon as he returned to the capital, his father gave him everything he should, despite his arrogance. He even handed over the most secretive hidden emperor guard of the Yu court guards to him without hesitation. Other than that annoying old lady, there was basically nothing else in the harem for him to worry about. Duan Yu was different. His unreliable father would not dote on his son as much as the divine prefecture emperor did. The emperor of Tsang province had so many sons and daughters, so why must he choose Duan Yu? Moreover, there were so many women in the harem and so many disputes. Duan Yu's mother's death was definitely not simple. Do your best to help him. Give him all your connections and money. Mo Lien ordered coldly. Yes. Tong Zheng was about to leave. However, he heard his master say coldly, don't let anything happen to him. Yes. Mo Lien had been sitting in her room until nightfall when she was awakened by a soft knock on the door. Xiao Zhongbang stood at the door and said, "Xiaoma, come out and eat. What are you doing cooped up in the house?" Mo Lien relaxed and stood up to greet him. "Father. Jojo said that he's going to go into seclusion to concoct some kind of pill." Xiao Zhongbang scratched his head and said with a smile, "If you don't have anything to do, then don't cooped up in your room. Come out and chat with everyone." "Okay." Mo Lien nodded with a smile. "Oh right, you have to go to court early in the morning tomorrow, right? Your mother said she's going to make breakfast for you. Remember to go after eating." Although Changle Avenue wasn't far from the palace, it wasn't as close as the Eastern Palace. It would take half an hour to get there. Since the Crown Prince was staying here, he had to leave a bit earlier. "Okay," Prince Mo agreed with a smile. Xiao Zhongbang nodded with a chuckle. Chapter 3962. Inside the lush forest behind the Royal Academy's mountain, everyone silently stood in front of the ice crystal coffin, not speaking for a long time. The atmosphere appeared very oppressive. "Eldest brother, please reconsider." Yun Piaomiao lowered her gaze and quietly said, "After all, this matter concerns her master, so Jojo should have the right to know." Yun Piaomiao heaved a long sigh, and her gaze lingered on the ice crystal coffin, a trace of exhaustion showing on her face. All these years, from painstakingly gathering medicinal herbs to deliberating and discussing which experienced pill refiner to invite to help, after much consideration, she invited Medicine King Island's High Venerable, a perfected god-rank great pill refiner, Hewan. In the end all her previous efforts were wasted. The leaves rustled, and Ni Hanji walked out from behind the forest in a long blue floral dress, her lustrous black hair tied up in a bun. She was supporting a slightly aged and weary elderly man. "Why did Yuan get up?" Yun Piaomiao turned to ask. On the side, Great Master Wu Yen silently lowered his eyes, his thoughts unknown. Hewan had his disciple, Ni Hanji, help him up a few steps and looked at the purple-robed woman inside the ice crystal coffin with her eyes tightly shut, as if she was sleeping soundly. The woman's gentle features revealed a bit of charm and enchantment, and her gorgeous appearance was gorgeous. Even though her eyes were closed, it seemed like it could not steal away the myriad of light that belonged to her. If Arbor was here, he would definitely be shocked. Wasn't this the master she yearned for so dearly? Murong Sun's body was unharmed, but she had lain inside this ice crystal coffin for who knew how long. Yun Piaomiao turned around and nodded at Hewen. "Hewen's body is unwell, so you should rest more." Hewen said in shame, "I wasn't able to save your esteemed friend and even wasted such an excellent medicinal herb for nothing." Yun Piaomiao interrupted him. Hewen also tried his best. Yun Piaomiao would not blame Hewen for not being able to refine the soul-returning pill. In reality, Hewen did refine it, and because he skipped levels to refine a sacred rank pill, Great Master Hewen also suffered a bit of backlash, so his complexion was still pale. Unfortunately, the soul-returning pill that Hewen had refined was barely a low-grade orange-patterned pill. Its medicinal strength was not enough to wake Asun up. So in fact, this soul-returning pill was only a half-waste pill with poor quality. Yun Fei let out a long sigh. Was this fate? Originally, he thought that with Sir Hewen's ability, as long as he could concoct a middle-grade blue-veined pill, he would be able to save Asun. Even if the medicinal effect was slightly lacking, as long as the person could wake up and slowly recuperate for the rest of his life, it would be fine. Of course, a mid-grade blue-patterned pill was definitely not comparable to a high-grade purple-patterned or supreme-grade black-patterned pill. But at least there was hope, right? Who would have thought that even so the chances were still so slim? Yun Fiang silently lowered his eyes and let out a long sigh in his heart. His gentle gaze landed on Murong Sun as he deeply gazed at her. The soul-returning pill failed. This meant that Asun could not be saved in the end. Asun's body had already been laid here for 3 days. She had to be buried the day after tomorrow at the latest. No matter what, in the end, people still had to be buried in peace. Murong Sun, this is a polysyllabic word, so some people pronounce it Chien. It's unpleasant to hear, so I must correct you all, haha. Chapter 3963. Ni Hanji glanced at the aloof Yun Fei, and anger involuntarily flashed through her eyes. She walked up to support Sir Hewen and arrogantly questioned, Headmaster Yun, you aren't blaming teacher, right? In order to refine the soul-returning pill this time, teacher spent a lot of effort and paid a huge price. There was even a spiritual energy backlash during the refining process. It's not like my master didn't refine the soul-returning pill. Ni Hanji coldly said, she can only blame herself for being unlucky and not waking up after eating the soul-returning pill. Hanji, Hewen hastily reprimanded her. The soul-returning pill was only refined into a low-grade soul-returning pill, so Hewen's guilt was indescribable. Now that he heard his disciple say this and tried her best to argue her way back to save face, he felt even more embarrassed. Hewen was a magnanimous person, so he was actually very ashamed that he couldn't win back Murong Sun. Especially since he also wasted so many precious herbs. It was very difficult for normal people to gather such a set of herbs, not to mention that it was originally used to save a person's life. Hewen sighed. He then apologetically glanced at Yun Fei and Yun Piaomiao. Apologies, Hanji is still young and doesn't know any better. I hope you don't take offense. Yun Piaomiao and Yun Fei had experienced Ni Hanji's temperament these past few days, so they didn't want to lower themselves to this girl's level. However, Yun Fei's attitude towards Hewen clearly turned colder. If Sir doesn't have other matters, please return to the guest court to recuperate first. Ni Hanji's personality truly wasn't that likable. She was 18 or 19 years old, not an 8 or 9-year-old child. She should be sensible now. Sir Hewen sighed and patted Ni Hanji's hand. Disciple, let's go back first. Ni Hanji's pretty face was cold as she supported Hewen back to the guest court. Along the way, she complained in dissatisfaction, Master, you were injured because of them. Judging from their attitude, they seem to be very dissatisfied with us. Master didn't save her. That's still not Master's responsibility. Ni Hanji angrily said, moreover, Master was injured to refine this soul-returning pill. What else do they want? The more Ni Hanji spoke, the angrier she became. Could it be that they want Master to pay with his life? Sir Hewen let out a long sigh. Hanji, I know you're worried about Master out of good intentions. It's just that this time, Master wasted so many excellent medicinal herbs to refine a low-grade orange-patterned pill. Hewen sighed. Master also feels bad in his heart. Ni Hanji silently lowered her eyes and pursed her lips as she muttered, they were the ones who asked Master to refine it. Besides, it's not like Master hasn't refined any medicinal pills. Yes, it was refined, but the quality was not good enough. Hewen glanced at his beloved disciple, patted her hand and said, it's Master who has let down Principal Yun and the others. Don't always go and insult people. Ni Hanji snorted, they don't respect Master, which means they don't put Medicine King Island in their eyes. What kind of status did Medicine King Island have? Even existences like the City of Shadows and the Fiery City would be very courteous to the people of Medicine King Island. A mere principal of the royal school actually dared to give the people of Medicine King Island a hard time. Hewen was helpless. Principal Yun's attitude towards us is extremely good. It was just that he didn't flatter them like ordinary people, but his usual etiquette was also very considerate, and he had never neglected the master and disciple duo. Chapter 3964. Even so, Ni Hanji was still dissatisfied. Her master worked so hard to save her, so why shouldn't he give them a good look? Hewen knew his beloved disciple's temper and said helplessly, all right, we'll stay for 2 more days at most. After that woman is buried, we'll return to the island. Ni Hanji grumbled, probably muttering to herself, why do we have to wait for that woman to be buried? However, since it was her master's decision, Ni Hanji didn't object and supported His Excellency. He went back to the guest court to rest. Seeing the two of them walk away, Great Master Wu Yan sighed and said, "What a pity." He didn't know if it was a pity that His Excellency He Wen had such a good temperament to take in such a frivolous disciple, or if it was a pity that the superior medicinal ingredients were used to refine pills of that quality. It was a complete waste of the energy and time previously spent. Yun Piaomiao turned to look at the silent Yun Fiang and said softly, "Eldest brother, I insist. No matter what, Jojo should know about this matter." Yun Fiang remained silent, but his silent attitude already made everything clear. 2 days later. Arbor opened her eyes in a small room in the side hall on the first floor of the longevity hall filled with divine power on the main planet. Her complexion was a bit pale, but she seemed to be in good spirits. The little stoic reached out to take out a bottle of nutrient fluid from her inner world and downed it. Chio's voice immediately rang in her ears like a demonic tune. "Master, Master, you've come out of seclusion, Master, Master." Arbor raised her brow and looked down at herself. After 3 days of seclusion, there was a layer of black oil on her body. She immediately pinched her nose in disdain. After she advanced to God realm, she didn't have time to properly stabilize her realm. Now that she had cultivated for 3 days in the outside world for more than 30 days, her realm had clearly stabilized. She had successfully transitioned from spiritual ruin realm to divine ruin realm. As for her current cultivation, she had already reached the beginner level of divine dominator level 2. The little girl looked down at her lustrous palms. With a thought, she immediately appeared in the hot spring in her house. After a comfortable bath, he changed into a clean set of violet clothes. The little stoic's figure fluttered and flew out of the main planet's range. Her figure spun lightly, and she appeared next to the little tray ant that was still emitting demonic sounds. The sapling had just called out, "Master has come out of seclusion," and ignored Chio. Chio's life is so bitter. Suddenly, he saw a slender figure appear beside him. His beady eyes immediately lit up. Chio looked up at its little master with a dreamy expression, its voice rippling. "Master, you seem to have become prettier again." Not only had Master Silver become more beautiful, her temperament had also become much calmer. If he didn't say anything and just stood there, it would be as if his entire person had disappeared from the world. There was no sense of existence at all. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others rushed over when they heard the news. They sized up the little stoic and nodded repeatedly. At this time, the little guy had completely entered the divine realm, and a trace of restrained aura appeared on his body. When she moved, she could conquer the world. When she moved, she was as quiet as the floating clouds and the idle moon. Her exquisite face was expressionless, making it hard for people to look away. I refined quite a few level 15 divinity breakthrough pills, divinity congealing pills, and divinity recovery pills. I don't know if they'll be useful to you guys. Arbor casually tossed several bottles of pills over. Dao Wuji and the others gleefully caught a bottle in each hand, and their eyes instantly lit up. Sir Jojo's products were definitely extraordinary items. Chapter 3965. When Arbor exited the star domain, he immediately saw Mo Yen striding forward with a slight smile. "You've been waiting for a long time, huh?" Arbor blinked and discovered that he had been pulled into his hubby's embrace. "Waiting for a long time is what I miss." Mo Yen lowered his head to look at him, a smile rippling in his phoenix eyes. "My Jojo, with your current appearance, I really want to hide you forever and not let anyone see you." He pinched her soft little face, his expression full of gentleness. Arbor's eyes brightened. "I'm beautiful." Mo Yen almost laughed out loud. He nodded and said, "Extremely beautiful." Arbor nodded in satisfaction and caressed his handsome face in passing. "Only like this can I be worthy of my peerlessly handsome hubby." Mo Yen. It seemed like his wife had intentionally or unintentionally flirted with him again. What a vexing little fellow. Mo Lien was helpless. He pulled her into his embrace and lowered his head to kiss her fair forehead. Do you feel unwell? Jojo's complexion seemed to have paled a bit from refining pills above her level this time. He wondered if she was suffering from the backlash of her divine power. I'm fine. Arbor patted the back of his hand, indicating for him to set his mind at ease. I've already taken the nutrient solution. I'll be fine after recuperating for a day or two. As he spoke, he took out a jade box half the size of a palm from his pocket and placed it in Mo Lien's palm. He looked up and winked at him. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. Mo Lien couldn't describe what he was feeling, but at this moment, he tightly gripped the jade box in his hand and hugged the little stoic tightly, as if wanting to fuse her into the depths of his heart. Jojo, you're so nice. He rubbed his chin lightly on her small head and cupped her small face, gazing at her affectionately. Have I ever told you that you're the most wonderful girl in the world? I'm indeed not bad. The little stoic's eyes shone. If she had a small tail right now, it would definitely wag. Mo Lien chuckled and lifted her up, kissing her without allowing her to protest. My chow chow. Jojo was full of surprises every day. The more one interacted with Jojo, the more one fell in love with him. Reporting to your highness. Stay up late's voice was heard from outside the door. The little stoic's charming face flushed red, and she stuttered as she reached out to punch him with a moderate force. Mo Lien let go of him unhappily and turned to look at the door. What's the matter? Why was this guy so tactless? Can't you see that he's being intimate with his wife? They hadn't seen each other for a few days. Even a kiss couldn't make up for the emptiness in his heart. Ao Yi coughed lightly. King Zheng's residence has sent someone to welcome the crown princess. Prince Mo frowned. Only now did he remember the matter of Princess Consort Zheng's birthday. However, Arbor understood his intentions and grasped his hand. Let's send the medicine to the palace first. Royal father should be anxious from waiting these past few days. Even though Mo Lushing didn't press or ask, he was definitely more anxious than anyone else on the inside. She understood this feeling of worrying about personal gains and losses. It was rare that she didn't want to diss the emperor and only wanted to send the medicine over first. Okay. Mo Lien gently glanced at his wife and grasped the jade box in his hand. When he recalled that the soul-returning pill was in his hands, there was hope for his mother's soul to return. For some reason, Mo Lien actually felt a sense of homesickness. Arbor gently looked at him and said softly, I'll go with you. Okay. Mo Lien grasped her small hand. No matter what happened, as long as Jojo was there, he would be at ease. Chapter 3966. As long as Jojo was by his side, no matter what kind of hopeless situation or hardship he faced, he would not be afraid. The two stepped out of the door, and the little crown princess said to the steward from King Zheng's estate, You go back first. After some time, His Highness and I will go to King Zheng's estate by ourselves. The steward naturally did not dare to neglect the two and nodded repeatedly. He watched with a puzzled expression as the two got on the carriage and drove towards the palace. Strange, why did the crown prince and crown princess choose to return to the palace at this time? When the steward returned to King Zheng's estate, he did not dare to hide anything and told King Zheng and Princess Consort Zheng the whole story. King Zheng, Mo Shikang, frowned slightly. He was naturally somewhat dissatisfied. Previously, the husband and wife were so humble when they went to deliver the invitation. Who would have thought that the crown prince and crown princess would suddenly change their mind today? Princess Consort Zheng could tell that the king was dissatisfied. She lowered her eyes slightly and said faintly, King, don't be angry. Didn't the steward say that His Highness the Crown Prince and Crown Princess will come after finishing their business? You can't delay His Highness the Crown Prince and Crown Princess business because of this concubine's small birthday. King Zheng said coldly, the Crown Prince has been staying at the Crown Princess's maternal home these past few days. What business does he have that he has to wait until today to enter the palace? In Mo Shikong's view, the Crown Prince was clearly showing him his power. He was telling him, with his noble and unparalleled status, he would be giving him face if he wanted to come. If he did not want to come, he could not do anything to him. Mo Shikong lowered his eyes and sneered, "What a high-spirited His Highness the Crown Prince." Princess Consort Cheng frowned slightly. "King, it's fine to say such words in front of Qinxie. Don't show such an attitude in front of others." King Zheng, Mo Shikong, slapped the table with a bang and said angrily, "What, does Princess Consort also think that in front of the Crown Prince, I'm just the mud under his feet that can be trampled on?" Princess Consort Cheng sighed. Her gaze was fixed on her husband as she said, "Your Highness, don't forget this. If you don't have the Mo surname, you're nothing. How dare you?" Mo Shikong grabbed a teacup and smashed it on the ground. The group of servant girls and manservants waiting outside the garden all knelt down in unison. They were so frightened that they almost didn't dare to move their eyes away and breathe heavily. "What are you doing?" A rather imposing voice came from outside the door. He crossed the tall threshold with his hands behind his back. He glanced at his son and daughter-in-law with a dignified gaze. Liang Shi blindly followed behind her husband. Su Shitao, on the other hand, followed the two elders in with an expression of watching a good show. "Greetings, father and mother." Mo Shikong was very respectful towards his parents. When he saw them, he quickly got up and bowed. Princess Consort Cheng stood up and bowed to her parents-in-law with a cold and unremarkable face. "Father, mother. Sister-in-law, don't tell me you've made elder brother angry again." Su Shitao slanted his eyes and curled his lips. "As his wife, how can you be so rude to big brother?" Sister-in-law was born in an aristocratic family, but she didn't expect that she couldn't even compare to a girl from a small family. Her upbringing is really bad. Princess Consort Zheng's fingers trembled and curled up. She hated that she couldn't fly up and give this sister-in-law two heavy slaps. She talked to her about etiquette and upbringing. A shameless woman who could accept others calling her Princess Tao with a clear conscience dared to talk to her about upbringing. Chapter 3967. He stood with his hands behind his back, acting like a lord. He looked coldly at his daughter-in-law and reprimanded angrily, "What kind of daughter-in-law are you? How dare you disobey your own husband?" Princess Consort Zheng's anger was stifled in her chest, causing her to feel stifled. Princess Consort Zheng truly did not want to ridicule this father-in-law. She had truly never seen such an eccentric person. In the past, when the family was in trouble, they could throw the children away without hesitation. Now that they had found their eldest son and could seamlessly get into character, anyone who was slightly thin-skinned would not be able to do such a thing. However, He did it without any psychological burden. He was a natural-born actor. Princess Consort Zheng took a deep breath. "Father-in-law, this daughter-in-law cannot accept your reprimand." Which large family with knowledge and heritage would have a father-in-law directly jump out to reprimand his daughter-in-law? Princess Consort Zheng expressed that she did not think highly of the parents of a small family who could raise people like Su Shitao. He snorted coldly and wanted to say something else, but Prince Consort Zheng spoke up, "Father, we are fine. The guests are about to arrive. Father, let's go to the forecourt to greet them." As he spoke, he gave Princess Consort Zheng a warning look, implying that she should behave herself. Princess Consort Zheng lowered her eyes somewhat weakly. Did her husband think that life was too easy? He liked to pick fights with the Crown Prince and his wife for no reason. Did he think that they would not retaliate, or that they would indulge him as usual? Eldest sister-in-law. Su Shitao shrieked, "What kind of expression is that? You can't be very dissatisfied with eldest brother, right?" Su Shitao paused and looked angrily at Princess Consort Zheng, who was walking past him. He chased after her and said angrily, I am talking to you. Eldest sister-in-law, what kind of attitude is this? Madame Liang hurriedly followed and tugged at her daughter's hand. Tao, don't bother your eldest sister-in-law. There are many guests in the inner courtyard. Don't be impolite later. Su Shitao looked indignantly at his soft-tempered mother with dissatisfaction. Only you are used to being a good person. Because the young couple did not go to Prince Consort Zheng's estate in time, Prince Consort Zheng was dissatisfied with them. Prince Mo and Arbor naturally did not know. Even if they knew, they wouldn't take it to heart. To them, nothing was more important than saving their mother. When Arbor and Mo Lien hurried into the palace, the great emperor seemed to have realized something. When the head eunuch came to report, Mo Luxing came out to greet them, his expression slightly excited as he looked at his son and daughter-in-law. Until Mo Lien nodded at him affirmatively. Mo Luxing let out a sigh of relief, and his eyes couldn't help but become slightly moist. He had waited for so many years. He had thought about it for so many years. When this day finally came, a trace of fear rose in his heart. Arbor entered the underground ice palace for the first time. The entire ice palace was built under Mo Luxing's sleeping quarters. As far as the eye could see, it was a world of glaciers. In front of his eyes was a hazy pure white color. Mo Luxing led the two of them straight to the ice coffin. The three of them stared silently at the woman in the ice coffin, who was wearing a red dress and smiling with her eyes closed. A woman who could give birth to a child as handsome as Mo Lien was naturally a woman with unparalleled beauty. Even though he was mentally prepared, the moment Sir Jojo saw his mother-in-law for the first time, he still felt that this woman was one of a kind in the world. Mo Luxing sent the pill into his flawless mouth. See you tomorrow. Chapter 3968. The soul-returning pill didn't need to be swallowed, it melted in the mouth. On Bai Wuxia's body, there seemed to be a faint trace of soft light. Mo Luxing stood in front of the ice coffin, holding his breath and waiting, his gaze glued to his wife, not daring to let go at all. Arbor tilted her head to look at her husband, squeezed his hand, and said in a low voice, "Don't worry." After this soul-returning pill was refined, she knew in her heart that Mo Lien's mother could be saved. This was a black-veined supreme-grade soul-returning pill, but the strange thing was, to refine such a heaven-defying pill, there was actually not a trace of lightning floating over to strike her in broad daylight. Could it be the heavenly Tao didn't want to bother with her anymore? Mo Lien turned her head to look at her, lightly nodding her head, a faint smile flitting across her lips. And at this time, Mo Luxing suddenly cried out in alarm, grabbing his son's hand. "Little glutinous dumpling, quickly look. Listen, your mother, is there a breathing sound?" Mo Lien's hand hurt from her father's grip, she couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Yes. Mo Luxing's eyes quickly lit up, his gaze landing on his wife, nervously grabbing his son's hand tightly. Bai Wuxia was quietly lying in the ice coffin. From the faint breathing at the beginning, it slowly became continuous. That voice, when it landed in Mo Luxing's ears, was like the sound of nature twining around. Mo Luxing's eyes immediately lit up with joy, pulling his son forward and saying, "Wuxia, Wuxia, can you hear my voice? Wuxia, Wuxia." God knows how many days and nights, he had also been like this, constantly calling for her. But his Wuxia, from beginning to end, never gave a trace of response. Right now, he seemed to have seen hope, saw the dawn rising. Mo Luxing couldn't help but tremble, throwing away his son's hand, he caressed his wife's somewhat cold wrist. Mo Lien at the side rolled her eyes at her father. This was a typical person who forgot about his son once he had a wife in his eyes. Men, he. The little stoic turned to look at her husband's expression. She blinked and walked up to hold his hand. After taking the pill, mother should wake up in at most 7 to 8 minutes. She hasn't opened her eyes yet. She probably slept, pretended, for too long, didn't dare, to, open, her eyes, open, so she's not in a good mood. The father and son hurriedly turned to look at her, revealing a somewhat similar puzzled face at the same time. Unimpeded chi. Was there such a saying? Yes. The little stoic spouted nonsense in deadly earnest. Royal father will pass on a breath to mother. Mother will be able to open her eyes after her breathing calms down. Transferring chi. Mo Liusheng's eyes lit up. He knew how to do this, and he was quite adept at it. However, Mo Liusheng glanced at the two candles at the side and narrowed his eyes. Don't these two brats know how to hide first? The two of them looked at him calmly. Mo Liusheng had no other choice but to pretend that the two of them didn't exist. He stepped forward to give his wife a kiss. However, he had only bent down for a few seconds, and his breath had yet to come close. The Empress's eyes suddenly opened. The little stoic blinked and met Mo Lien's eyes. Mo Liusheng stood there dumbfounded, unable to react for a while. The two of them stared at each other like this for a while before Mo Liusheng belatedly grabbed the Empress's wrist and said excitedly, Wuxia. Chapter 3969. Bai Wuxia's gaze was somewhat dazed as she stared deeply at her husband. Her pair of phoenix eyes were overflowing with light. This deep sleep had lasted for 17 years. When she woke up now, the two of them felt as if they had met after a lifetime. Bai Wuxia raised his hand. His gaze moved slightly, and he touched his face that was full of warmth. In fact, all these years, she could always vaguely hear his voice. Every once in a while, he would whisper in her ear for a long time. It was such a man, her husband, the love of her life. For 17 years, he had never given up on saving her. Just now, when she woke up and was happy to find that she seemed to be able to move. For some reason, because she was so excited, she felt a sense of homesickness and didn't dare to open her eyes for a moment. Now, looking at that familiar face, looking at the face that she had been thinking about for a long time, the face that was engraved in her heart, Bai Wuxia smiled in relief and reached out to hug Mo Liusheng. Wuxia, Wuxia. Mo Liusheng kept calling her name and hugged her tightly. It was as if at this moment, there was no one else in their line of sight except for each other. Bai Wuxia took a deep breath and looked up. She saw a young man who looked somewhat similar to her husband and whose eyes were very similar to her own. Her heart trembled slightly, and she suddenly raised her hand in the direction of Mo Lien. Mo Lien quickly stepped forward, and her hand was firmly grabbed by her somewhat cold hand. Bai Wuxia turned to look at her husband with joy. Liusheng, this is our family's little glutinous rice ball. Mo Liusheng nodded. Bai Wuxia reached out to hug her son, tears streaming down her face. Little glutinous rice ball had grown so big. She had missed her son's 17 years of growth. Thinking of this, Bai Wuxia's heart was filled with bitterness. She raised her hand and touched her son's hair. Bai Wuxia's eyes were filled with love. Little glutinous rice ball, do you blame mother? Mother hasn't been able to take good care of you all these years and has made you suffer a lot. It was the nature of mother and son. Even if it was the first time they met in 17 years, Mo Lien did not feel any unfamiliarity with his mother in front of him. In fact, his memories seemed to have brought him back to 17 years ago. He recalled the scene when his mother, dressed in white, carried him to the half-moon cliff to enjoy the scenery. At that time, she was exactly the same as she was now. She held his little paw and smiled as she raised her hand to pat his head. These two figures inexplicably overlapped, causing Mo Lien's eyes to moisten slightly. Mother. The Crown Prince's voice was choked with emotion as he called out softly. Celestial Empress tears instantly fell like rain. She raised her hand and caressed her son's head. Little glutinous dumpling, mother has let you down. For the rest of our lives, mother will take good care of you and make it up to you. Mo Lien immediately regained her senses and raised her head. Mother, I've married a wife. I've already given the rest of my life to my wife. The Emperor and Empress, by Wuxia, chuckled and turned to look at Arbor, who was standing at the side. He waved at her and looked at her with joy. Little glutinous dumpling is marrying a wife. That's a perfect pair. Tang Yuan's wife. Sir Jojo took a few steps forward with a dumbfounded expression, and Celestial Empress gently held his small hand. Bai Wuxia looked at her daughter-in-law with smiling eyes. She felt that she was very compatible with her at first glance, and her fondness for her was beyond words. The little girl was too exquisite. Bai Wuxia believed that her appearance was incomparably magnificent, but this little stoic-faced girl in front of her actually surpassed her by half. Chapter 3970. Tang Yuan's wife. Come over and let mother take a look. You're really born well. Arbor, Mo Lien, Mo Lusheng couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth and laugh out loud. See, he also had a wife. In the future, he would also have a wife to help him. This pair of little brats had been arrogant in front of him for a long time. It was still unknown who would win in the future. Mother, my wife's name is Jojo. Mo Lien frowned unhappily. Jojo? Bai Wuxia smiled lightly and held Arbor's little hand. Jojo. Bai Wuxia sighed and said regretfully, Mother missed little Tang Yuan's 17 years of growth and missed your extremely important wedding. Mother can't make up for these things anymore. But Mother can promise you that I won't miss anything for you in the future. Bai Wuxia looked at the pair of children in front of her with curved eyes and said softly, okay. Prince Mo reached out and held his wife's hand. Both of them nodded. A series of hurried footsteps came from the entrance of the ice palace. Old Master Bai rushed in excitedly with his people. At a glance, he saw his daughter sitting up in the ice coffin. His pair of old eyes immediately turned red. Xia, Father. Bai Wuxia was supported by Mo Lusheng and slowly stepped out of the ice coffin. Old Master Bai rushed forward with red eyes and hugged his daughter into his arms. The feelings that he had suppressed for a long time were released in an instant. Mo Lien glanced at them and held his wife's little hand. The young couple quietly left the room. As soon as they walked out of Mo Lusheng's bedroom, the two of them looked up at the bright light outside the sky at the same time. The sun was scorching today. In the blue sky, there were no clouds in sight. It was as if it was announcing something. Arbor turned to look at Mo Lien and saw a smile on his lips. His footsteps were light, and it was obvious that he was in a good mood. That's right, what could be more delightful than having a whole family together? The corners of Jojo's mouth curled up as he gently poked his palm with his finger. Soon, the whole Dragon Flame City was in an uproar. Celestial Empress consumed the pill refined by the Crown Princess and was completely awake. The great Emperor was overjoyed and personally wrote a letter, announcing to the world that he would be pardoned. At this time, Arbor and Mo Lien's carriage had already arrived at the gate of King Zheng's residence. King Zheng and Consort Zheng personally came out to welcome them with a smile. There was no sign on Prince Zheng's face that he had quarreled with Princess Zheng because of the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess. Zheng Wang Mo Lien cupped his fists and bowed towards Mo Lien. Your Highness the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess have graced my humble abode with your presence. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. Prince Mo was in a good mood today. He smiled faintly at King Zheng and nodded. Brother King Zheng, sister-in-law King Zheng, there's no need to be so polite. You may rise. Arbor's face was calm as he said faintly, today is Princess Zheng's birthday. I hope Princess Zheng won't take offense to this small gift. With that, Arbor raised his hand, and Kai Xiu presented a palm-sized brocade box with both hands. She said in a clear voice, one beautifying pill from Zhenhua Workshop to congratulate Princess Zheng on her birthday. I wish Princess Consort a long life and a happy life." Many people at the door sucked in a breath of cold air and whispered in each other's ears. They muttered softly, feeling that the crown princess was very generous. One had to know that the beautifying pill from Zhenhua workshop had already been sold at a sky-high price of 5 million each. Chapter 3971. Just like that, the 3 beautifying pills every month were all sought after by the noblewomen of Dragon Flame City. Moreover, it was said that the beautifying pill's reputation had already spread. If its reputation spread throughout the 3 states in the future, the price would probably be more than 5 million. After all, the precious painting workshop had a limited supply of beautifying pills every month, and they would have to wait for another month to sell out. In order to get the beautifying pill as soon as possible, many noblewomen and daughters of aristocratic families did not hesitate to spend a lot of money to buy one. Princess Zheng looked flattered and quickly ordered her personal maidservant to take the small brocade box that Saishio handed over. After curtsying towards Qiao Mu, Princess Consort Zheng said with a smile, "Many thanks to the Crown Prince Consort." Princess Consort Zheng's appearance was clearly very mediocre among the many noble ladies. Her forehead was narrow and slightly sunken, her nose was sharp and narrow, and her mouth was very wide. But today, under the contrast of her bright red dress, her entire body was radiant, and it made her originally mediocre appearance a little brighter. The corners of Mo Shikang's mouth finally curled into an extremely faint smile. The crown princess offered such a generous gift. Regardless of whether she was doing it for others to see, at least Prince Zheng's residence had gained face today. Which man did not want face? If the crown prince and crown princess did not come today. If the crown prince and crown princess did not come today, there would definitely be rumors that the crown prince and crown princess did not care about him, Prince Zheng. Recently, the entire Prince Zheng's residence was not very peaceful. If such rumors were to spread, it would be too troublesome. Fortunately, the little crown princess was tactful. Mo Shikang nodded slightly in satisfaction and turned to the crown prince with a smile. "Crown prince, please enter the residence." Prince Mo nodded slightly. He was still thinking about the machine-operated bird and the royal school, so he did not plan to stay in Prince Zheng's residence for long. But if he did not enter the residence, it would be too embarrassing for Prince Zheng. So he planned to enter Prince Zheng's residence with Jojo for a few drinks and then find an excuse to leave. Mo Shikang led the way with a smile and led the crown prince up the stairs. Along the way, all the guests bowed in greeting. "Your Highness the Crown Prince." "Crown Princess." Crown Prince Mo had just stepped up 2 steps while holding his wifey's hand when he heard a soft sobbing sound coming from behind them. It was accompanied by an extremely bitter cry that sounded like the weeping of a resentful woman. "Your Highness." Mo Shikang's face changed slightly. Everyone turned their heads and looked curiously at the weeping, delicate woman. This woman looked delicate, but her belly was slightly bulging. It was obvious that she had been pregnant for several months. Princess Zheng's face turned cold at once. She naturally recognized this delicate woman and had even secretly sent people to investigate her. King Zheng had been close to the Lin family recently. In Princess Consort Zheng's eyes, his eagerness to rope in the Lin family was too unwise. This woman was the daughter of a concubine of the Lin clan, Lin Wan, a shameless little wench. She actually dared to take advantage of the day when she was celebrating her birthday with a basin full of guests to come to the Prince Zheng's residence with her belly protruding and demanding an explanation. She was truly a lowly child raised by a slut. Princess Zheng's eyes turned cold instantly. She stood loftily on the wide steps and pointed at the woman. "Come, take this woman who is blocking the road and making a ruckus away. Flog her to death." The delicate woman looked up abruptly, her eyes filled with disbelief. When she met Princess Zheng's cold eyes, she could not help but shrink her neck. The night continued. Chapter 3972. Your Highness, Your Highness. Lin Wan panicked. She didn't know what to do when she saw several servants coming forward to pull her. She hurriedly reached out to cover her stomach and cried repeatedly. Her beautiful eyes stared straight at Mo Shikang. Xiao Mu remained expressionless as her husband pulled her to the side, creating a wide path for the king of Zheng and his family to express themselves to their heart's content. Stop! Prince Zheng, Mo Shikang, angrily rebuked. He walked down the steps and forcefully pushed away the servants who were pulling the delicate flower. He lifted his foot and kicked one of them out. Lin Wan wept and wiped her tears. She threw herself into Prince Zheng's arms, looking miserable as if she was about to be trampled to death. She sobbed, "Your Highness, Your Highness." Princess Zheng was so angry that she trembled all over. In order to welcome His Highness the Crown Prince, the Crown Princess, all the guests were standing in front of the door. This good show was about to start. She was the main character of today's birthday banquet and Prince Zheng's first wife. Now, her husband was hugging a concubine's daughter of the Lin family in front of so many guests and comforting her gently. How could she, the dignified Princess Zheng, put her face? Shi Yongyan was so angry that she fell backwards. She had already noticed that many madams and young misses around her were covering their mouths and looking like they were watching a good show. They were secretly laughing at her. Mo Shikang, you actually treat me like this and don't give me face. Princess Zheng didn't care about her face at this moment. She flicked her sleeves and walked towards the little white flower. Mo Shikang, you've done me right. Shi Yongyan's eyes were filled with endless anger. Mo Shikang was also somewhat regretful and angry. Of course, he knew what day it was today. He also didn't have much face to make such a fuss in front of so many masters and madams. He blamed Lin Wan for being insensible in his heart, but he was also angry that his wife didn't know how to handle things. Lin Wan was young and impulsive. Couldn't she be more tolerant? Which first wife would argue with a mistress at the front door? She really didn't know how to handle things. If she had asked someone to bring Wan in first and deal with this matter later, she would not have ended up in such a situation. Enough. Thinking of this, Mo Shikang glanced at Princess Consort Zheng with dissatisfaction. Can't you see that the guests are waiting at the door? Mo Shikang asked coldly, why don't you let them in? As for Wan her body is not in good condition. Let her rest in the backyard of the prince's mansion. A trace of anger flashed through Princess Zheng's eyes. She glanced at Lin Wan, who was slightly complacent, and said coldly, Mo Shikang, if this woman had stepped into the backyard of the mansion today, do you think I would have ordered someone to kill her? Among the crowd of onlookers, the madams and young misses were still fine. They didn't mind watching a good show. The young geniuses of the various large aristocratic families all became embarrassed one after another. In their opinion, it was not a problem for a man to be dissolute and flirt outside. However, if the affairs of his mistress were to spread to the birthday banquet of the first wife, it would be too embarrassing. At this time, it was not right to leave, but it was also not right to stay. A group of people stood at the door and looked at each other in dismay. Princess Zheng's unwillingness to give in completely made Prince Zheng, Mo Shikang, unable to get out of the embarrassing situation. In addition, the little white flower Lin Wan, beside him was crying non-stop. Chapter 3973. The anger in Mo Shikang's heart suddenly rose. He took the crying Lin Wan into his arms and comforted her softly. Then, he turned to glare at Princess Zheng and said, you don't know the rules. Which legal wife would disregard her manners and argue with a concubine outside the door like this? What are you all doing? Su He, who had heard the news, walked over angrily. Behind him was Madame Liang, who walked over submissively, and Su Shitao, who was arrogant and domineering. Seeing this scene, Su Shitao couldn't help but laugh in schadenfreude. Eldest sister-in-law, it's not that I, as your younger sister, want to criticize you, but a Wang Fei like you who constantly contradicts my eldest brother and makes him angry is really rare in the world." Princess Cheng sneered. "Since all of you don't care about your face, my face doesn't seem to be that important." Shi Yongyan. Mo Shikang, Prince Cheng, said coldly and sternly, staring at her with a warning gaze. Mo Shikang, ask yourself honestly. All these years, I've helped you take care of everything in Prince Cheng's mansion. Have I done anything wrong to you? Do you have to humiliate me like this? On my birthday, you let this woman humiliate me while she's pregnant with a bastard's child? Mo Shikang was speechless. He turned to glare at the sobbing Lin Wan Per. He lowered his voice and said, "Go back first. Didn't I tell you last time that this matter can't be rushed? Wait for the storm to die down, how can I not be rushed?" Lin Wan grabbed Mo Shikang's hand and cried while wiping her tears. She said softly, "Your Highness, even if I'm not in a hurry, our child can't wait." Wan looks at this belly. It's getting bigger day by day. Little White Flower sobbed while wiping her tears. "Your Highness, this is your first son. How can you let him suffer like this? Your Highness, you know my situation in the Lin family. My legal mother and sister Miao have always disliked me. If I stay in the Lin family, I don't know if I can keep this child alive." Speaking of the sad part, Lin Wan almost choked with sobs. "I came to find Wang Yi to discuss matters because I had no other choice. I didn't know that today was Wang Fei's birthday." Mo Shikang looked at her sobbing. She looked so weak that she could faint at any time. His heart ached as he hugged her and patted her back. Sister-in-law, Su Shitao said sarcastically, "How can you, as the wife, be so petty? Big brother is just taking in a concubine. Is there a need for you to block the entrance and cause such a ruckus? Younger sister-in-law, you are an unmarried girl. I advise you to be careful with your words." Princess Consort Cheng coldly faced Mo Shikang's family of troublesome people. However, his expression remained fearless. "You can even reach your hands into your elder brother's and sister-in-law's rooms. Do you not want to get married anymore?" Princess Consort Cheng sneered. Su Shitao was so angry that he stomped his feet. Just as he was about to curse, his mother, Liang Shi, tugged at his hand and he resentfully shut his mouth. Sir Jojo frowned and tugged at the crown prince's fingers. Mo Lien felt the little fellow's soft fingers rubbing against his fingertips. He smiled and lowered his head to look at her. "What's wrong? The atmosphere is foul. Let's go." "Okay." Mo Lien naturally wouldn't object. Following the principle that whatever his wife said was right, he nodded and took her little hand to walk towards the carriage. Chapter 3974. Everyone silently looked at each other before looking at the young couple's back in astonishment. His Highness the Crown Prince and Crown Princess left, just like that. Su Shitao was rebuffed by Princess Consort Cheng, so when she saw Arbor and Mo Lien leave without even looking back, her gaze immediately landed on them. Earlier, she was in a hurry to find fault with her sister-in-law, so she didn't pay attention to these two people at all. Now that she saw them, she immediately became even angrier. Wasn't this the woman who attacked her in the despondent pavilion? Second brother Su Shihua even wanted to seek justice for her, but in the end, he was beaten to death and carried back by this woman in the Royal Academy. That's right, eldest brother even warned her again and again not to provoke this damn woman in the future. What else did he say? He said that her status was noble and her cultivation was unfathomable. If she went against her, she would only be asking for trouble. However, this was intolerable, all right. It was truly the case that when enemies met, their eyes blazed with hatred. Su Shitao's hatred for the little stoic skyrocketed with this one glance. However, before she could step forward, she saw her eldest brother quickly walk over to stop them. "Crown Prince, Crown Princess, what are you doing? Since Brother Prince Zheng is busy with family matters, we and the Crown Princess won't disturb you any longer. Mo Lien glanced coldly at Prince Zheng, the disdain in her eyes evident. My wife dislikes your family for being messy. She even feels noisy when she takes a step inside. Prince Zheng's face flushed a bit. He also knew that today's incident had indeed turned the entire prince's estate into the laughingstock of Dragon Flame City. The little white flower beside him, Lin Wan, sneaked a peek at the Crown Prince. Her eyes wavered, and then her eyeballs turned slightly. Suddenly, her body tilted, and she threw herself in front of Arbor, kneeling in front of her. Crown Princess. Lin Wan sobbed as she wiped her tears and said, I beg the Crown Princess to uphold justice for this concubine. The Crown Princess is the woman with the noblest status here. I hope that the Crown Princess will plead for leniency on concubine's behalf and beg Her Highness Consort Zheng to stop forcing concubine, bitch, you dare. Princess Consort Zheng was so angry that she fell backwards. Her breath was stuck in her chest and she almost couldn't breathe. This bitch was really bold. She actually dared to distort the truth and say that she forced her. Lin Wan looked frightened. She lowered her head and crawled a few steps on the ground until she reached the young Crown Princess's feet. She cried so hard that she almost couldn't breathe. This concubine is only an insignificant person. Even if this concubine enters the prince's fu, I absolutely won't threaten Zheng Wanfei's position. I hope that the Crown Princess will put in a good word for me. Everyone looked at each other. Those who knew the true nature of the little Crown Princess could not help but silently light a candle for this girl with 0 IQ. It's one thing for you to kick up a fuss with King Zheng's family, but why did you have to go and kick up a fuss in front of the little Crown Princess? Is the little Crown Princess someone that you can kick up a fuss with? Cai Xiu. As expected, the Crown Prince Consort's cold voice instantly broke the clamor on the ground. Everyone could not help but tremble slightly in their hearts. Cai Xiu took 2 steps forward, her gaze cold and severe. Her hand moved like lightning, and 2 slaps landed on the stupefied Lin Wan's face. Audacious bitch! What kind of lowly status do you have to actually dare to speak to the Crown Princess like this? You even had the Crown Princess plead for leniency on your behalf and arrange for you to be a concubine when you enter King Zheng's fu. Where is your face? Cai Xiu was so angry that her liver hurt. King Zheng's fu was indeed, as the Crown Princess said, a foul atmosphere. Chapter 3975. A lowly servant dared to make a big fuss in front of Princess Consort Zheng. How was this a prince's residence? Even an ordinary noble family wouldn't be so unruly. Crown Princess. Mo Shikong was so angry that his face turned green. Little White Flower was trembling like a withered flower in the wind. She was so frightened that she trembled all over. She looked as though she had suffered a great shock as she gazed at the young Crown Prince Consort who was looking down at her from above. Arbor glanced coldly at Mo Shikong, then her gaze suddenly shifted to Little White Flower. She reached out her hand and sucked. The delicate little flower let out a trembling moan and was sucked in by Arbor. His neck was tightly gripped by a small, porcelain-white hand. Everyone had a stupefied look on their faces. Prince Mo's eyes were smiling, and the corners of his lips were slightly raised. Isn't Princess Consort Zheng generous and benevolent enough to you? Arbor's gaze was extremely cold as she looked at the delicate flower that kept trembling in her hand. If someone dares to come to this Crown Princess's birthday and humiliates me, infuriates me, provokes me, and challenges my patience. Arbor's lips curved into a cold, wooden smile. I will make her regret that she dared to come to this world for once. Everyone, didn't they say not to provoke the little Crown Princess? This blind fellow just had to go and make a fuss in front of the Crown Prince Consort. Look, look, the young Crown Prince Consort was someone who would go berserk on a whim. Little White Flower only felt that the cold hand on her neck was like a ghost's hand of death, squeezing her neck so hard that she couldn't breathe at all. If someone dares to steal my person. Arbor silently lowered her eyes, and her bone-chilling gaze fell on the trembling and almost stiff woman. I will kill her, and then I will kill the person who betrayed me. I will grind the bones of your true love into ashes. She leaned close to little white flower's ear and whispered with an indifferent expression, I will tell you that in this life and in the next life, even if you become ghosts, you will never see each other again. Lin Wan was so scared that she almost went into shock. The woman in front of her had a demon-like expression, and it made her tremble with fear. Xiao Mu looked down at her belly and creased her brows. You should rejoice that this crown prince consort isn't vassal consort Zheng. Seeing that you are innocent, I will let you go today. Don't bother me in the future. Scram. While everyone silently engraved the crown prince consort's words in their minds, they also secretly looked up at His Highness the Crown Prince. They wanted to see how His Highness would react. After all, the words that the Crown Princess had said earlier could be considered as treason and heresy. Then they couldn't help but want to kneel to His Highness. Not only did that His Highness not feel that the Crown Prince consort was wrong, he even stared at his wife with bright dog eyes, as though his wife was the stars, sun, and moon in the sky, dazzling and illuminating people. Alright, the Crown Princess's tsundere temper was 99%, no, 100%, caused by His Highness the Crown Prince's spoiling. Since His Highness the Crown Prince was enjoying it, there was nothing more to say. When they got on the carriage, Prince Mo immediately reached out and pulled the fuming Sir Jojo into his arms. Jojo, let's ignore that messy family in the future. His baby was so angry that he wanted to beat that idiot Mo Shikong to death. Arbor glanced at him and suddenly asked curiously, isn't this the way back to the palace? Jojo, let's go back to the academy. See you tomorrow. Chapter 3976. Startled, Arbor tilted her head and looked at Mo Lien. What's wrong? Lotus wouldn't have gone back to the academy if there wasn't anything important. After all, her mother had just woken up. As her son and daughter-in-law, she should have spent time with her mother first. Mo Lien rubbed her hair. I've sent someone to inform father and mother. There were too many things to tell you. When you went to the main planet to refine pills, Yun Piaomiao sent a mechanical bird to inform you and ask you to go back. Although that Dean Yun's actions are unreliable, he's still an expert. But he wouldn't joke around with us about important things. Mo Lien gazed at his wifey. I keep feeling that there should be something important that requires you to make a trip back. Xiao Mu's gaze was a bit dazed. What could Yun Piaomiao want from her? Is it about the final round of the heaven roll? Mo Lien shook his head. It was agreed that the final round would be postponed to the end of the month. If it was only about this, Yun Piaomiao wouldn't have sent a mechanical bird to inform you and ask you to go back. Arbor thought it made sense and nodded. Then let's go back and see. Since she couldn't guess what it was, she would talk about it when she went back. Mo Lien reached out and brushed a strand of hair in front of her eyes to the side of her face. He poked her soft face. Don't worry. It was impossible to say that she wasn't worried. After all, the more unknown something was, the more worrying it was. It was just that with Jojo's Lotus by her side, she wouldn't be worried, afraid, or flinch no matter what happened. Mo Lien held her hand. Jojo, let's use the teleportation array when we get out of the city. Okay. Arbor nodded and took out a teleportation array made of 128 jade talismans from her inner world. This set of talisman arrays had twice the number of teleportation talismans compared to the 64 teleportation talismans. The teleportation distance could now reach up to 500 miles. He could teleport about 20 times in a row. Even though there was such a long distance between Dragon Flame City and Wind Thunder City, it was estimated that they would reach Wind Thunder City in half an hour by alternating between two sets of teleportation talismans. The two of them left the city and activated the talisman formation in a low-key manner, beginning the teleportation journey that was tens of thousands of miles long. On the other side. Wind Thunder City, Royal Academy's back mountain. Amidst the crisp pine forest, a gentle breeze brushed past their clothes and blew away the pine needles that covered the ground. Yun Piaomiao's eyes were filled with exhaustion. She could not help but sigh softly in her heart. It had already been 2 days since the mechanical bird was sent out to send the message, but there was still no sign of the little girl returning. Could it be that this was the fate of the heavenly Tao, and it was irreversible? The paper money scattered all over the place, floating on the trees, falling on the ground, brushing past the coffin made of ice crystals, and falling into the tomb. Yun Fei's eyelids drooped slightly. His thin white figure looked exceptionally thin. Standing behind him, Great Master Wu Yan, Wei Wei, Zhou Danjin, Instructor Hu, and the others were also silent for a long time. All these years, Dean Yun had traveled all over the world to collect herbs and find a way to save Peak Master Murong. They had all seen it and understood it silently. However, the world was so unpredictable. There were many things that one couldn't succeed even if one tried hard. Chapter 3977. Perhaps, no matter how much he did, in the end, he would still get nothing. Just like him, he had thought that if he tried a little harder, he would be able to pick up the past with her. However, reality proved that there were many things that you missed at the time. Perhaps you would miss them forever. Yun Fei silently stared at the ice crystal coffin, tears falling silently. Big brother. Yun Piaomiao turned to look at him, reached out her hand, and gently patted his shoulder. Are you really not going to wait for Jojo? Jojo is a child who values relationships and righteousness. If you don't let her know about this, I'm afraid that she will blame you in the future. Yun Fei frowned slightly and said softly, why do you have to make her sad again? If he could save Ah Sun that day, the master and disciple would be able to reunite happily. But now, since he didn't manage to save her, why bother telling her about it? Your master originally had a chance to live, but now there's no hope at all. Isn't this making that child sad again for no reason? It's enough for him to experience the feeling of heartbreak alone. Yun Fei closed his eyes and sighed softly. There's no need to wait any longer, let's bury her. The few of them lifted the crystal coffin and placed it into the large wooden coffin at the side. After placing some burial objects inside, the few men who were working turned to look in Yun Fei's direction. Seeing him nod with a heavy expression, they closed the coffin. Whoosh! A shovel of soil fell down. Master Wu Yan immediately chanted in a deep voice, return to your life, Paradise Amitabha, may your pure light shine on me. Rustle, 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 the falling soil covered it. The benevolent oath took me, I am mindful today call Tathagata's name, Bodhi path seek the pure land, Buddha's original oath if there are living beings who wish to give birth to my country. The light from the talisman array dimmed, and the guards guarding Wind Thunder City couldn't help but blink, looking at the man and woman who suddenly appeared at the city gate with a stunned expression. The two of them raised the Royal Academy's identity token at the same time, and the guards immediately bowed and retreated to the side. Although they were curious, they didn't know where the two of them teleported from, and the guards wouldn't ask. His gaze followed the backs of the two as they entered the city. Arbor and Mo Lien held hands and ran towards the misty peak. She didn't run far before she heard a surprised cry. Xiao Xiao! Prince Mo! Arbor and Mo Lien both turned around and saw Qi Xianxian and little Fatty standing at the side of the crowd, waving happily at them. You're back so soon. Have you settled everything at home? By the way, Brother Mu has returned to the capital. Did you meet him? Arbor shook his head slightly. Mu Xingqian should have returned to the Mu residence directly. After she came out of seclusion, she went to the palace and then left the city. Naturally, she didn't see him. Jojo, the finals have been postponed to the end of the month. Don't be so impatient. No. Arbor shook his head again. I didn't come back for the competition this time. It was the dean who released the dawn bird and told me to come back. Principal. Qi Xianxian was stunned. Did something happen in the academy? Nothing. Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian said in unison, and then looked at each other. But speaking of which, the dean has been acting strangely these few days. I heard that he often brings people to the mountain behind the academy. Oh, by the way, the dean also invited an alchemy grandmaster from the Medicine King Island. That alchemy grandmaster's temper is all right, but his disciple, is really. Chapter 3978. Where are the dean and the rest now? They should be at the back of the mountain. Little Fatty scratched his head. These few days, the dean has sent people to guard the entrance of the back of the mountain. No one is allowed to go up the mountain. Arbor's eyelids twitched. He didn't have time to talk to them. He pulled Mo Lian's hand and ran towards the back of the mountain. Qi Xianxian was stunned. She quickly pulled Little Fatty and followed them, shouting, "Jojo, Jojo. Where are you going?" Seeing that she was anxious, Mo Lian was just about to pick her up and speed up when he suddenly saw her body flicker, and she suddenly appeared at a place 5 kilometers away. Mo Lian was stunned. Then, her eyes lit up. She increased her speed and appeared beside her. The two of them disappeared from Little Fatty and Qi Xuanxuan's sight in the blink of an eye. Qi Xianxian opened her small mouth and cried out, "Follow me." God, even Jojo's speed couldn't keep up. The two of them appeared at the entrance of the back of the mountain in just a few minutes. They saw the two disciples guarding the mountain path stop them. They were shaking their heads and saying something. Arbor's figure flashed and appeared in front of them. He was so fast that the other two students were dazzled. Crown Princess. The two students guarding the mountain were Zhang Mingqiu and Lu Pinwen. They were two of the 4 students who hitched a ride on the Ox Head Mountain. When the two of them saw Arbor appear at the entrance of the mountain path, they were stunned. Then, they smiled. "Crown Princess, Crown Prince, you're back at the school." Arbor nodded slightly and glanced at the two people who were stopped by them. Then, he saw that the two people were looking back at them. One of them was an old man with white hair and a white beard. He looked kind and his eyes were very gentle. The other person was a girl around 18 or 19 years old. She looked proud and solemn. Arbor didn't say much to them. He just pointed up the mountain path. Lu Pinwen immediately put on a troubled expression and scratched his head. "It's not that we don't want the two of you to go, but the dean's elder brother gave the order this morning that no one is allowed to go up the mountain." Arbor raised his eyebrows slightly. "Big brother Dean? Which saint was this? Why won't you let us go up the mountain?" The red-clothed girl couldn't help but rebuke angrily. "Do you think we want to go up the mountain? If it wasn't for my master suddenly thinking of a way to remedy the situation, why would we need to go up the mountain and talk things out with them?" Arbor looked back at them in confusion. "And you are? Who are you?" The girl raised her chin proudly and looked askance at her. "You're also a student of the royal school. Crown Princess, this is Sir Hewen, whom Dean Yun invited from Medicine King Island. That's Hewen's disciple, Ni Hanji." Lu Pinwen hurriedly said. Arbor looked up and down at Sir Hewen. "The dean invited the two of you to refine pills?" Sir Hewen nodded kindly and said amiably, "That's right." "Refine what pills?" Ni Hanji's expression changed. She put her hands on her hips and said angrily, "I asked you who you were just now, but you didn't answer. Don't you think it's rude to ask a few questions in a row?" Lu Pinwen couldn't help but roll his eyes. This young lady Ni was acting up again. Why did she have to show off in front of the little crown princess for no reason? She had to be careful not to be beaten to a pulp. However, the people in the school had enough of her. Chapter 3979. Just let her try her luck in front of the little crown princess. Otherwise, this woman would always think that she was the most capable person in the world. Arbor glanced at her and stared at the index finger she was pointing at him. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed it. He pulled it back forcefully, and there was a crack sound. His Excellency Hewen was dumbfounded. Ni Hanji's shriek instantly pierced through the clear sky. Lu Pinwen and Zhang Mingqiu looked at each other and felt an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. Huh, she indeed turned into dregs in minutes, don't point your finger at me. Arbor said coldly, and then pushed her forcefully with a look of disdain. Ni Hanji staggered back a few steps and was supported by His Excellency Hewen with a pale face. Hewen looked at his beloved disciple with a pained expression and said repeatedly, Hanji, Hanji, come, give me the medicine first. The bottle of ointment that Hewen had just taken out was snatched away by Arbor in the blink of an eye. Ni Hanji raised her head and glared at Arbor hatefully. She said each word coldly, you're very good. Arbor looked at her disapprovingly and tossed the ointment in his hand. If you're not capable enough, then lower your head and be a good person. Don't be arrogant everywhere. In this world, no one has the obligation to spoil you. If it weren't for the fact that Ni Hanji's expression was really ugly, to be honest, Zhang Mingqiu and Lu Pinwen really wanted to give the little crown princess a good round of applause. Wasn't that right? This Ni Hanji had been picky about everything the moment she came to the royal school. She looked down on everything. She didn't live well and didn't eat well. She felt like a fucking immortal had descended. Her ability was just a fart, but she talked a lot of nonsense. It should be left to a swift and decisive person like the little crown princess to discipline this unruly woman. What did she want to see that she didn't like? Great, now she had kicked an iron plate. She was the one who deserved it. Arbor snorted coldly and threw the ointment back into Hewen's hand. He pulled Mo Lien and turned to go up the mountain. Zhang Mingqiu pretended to stop her with a troubled expression and said pitifully, Crown Princess, what if the dean blames us? Mo Lien smiled faintly as he looked at his two fellow students, saying nonchalantly, you can choose. Turn a blind eye and let us go up the mountain. Or we can beat you unconscious before we go up the mountain. Lu Pinwen and Zhang Quming looked at each other and twitched their lips at the same time. They subconsciously took 2 steps back. Good people don't fight with evil people. Can't they just give in? Xiao Mu turned her body sideways and sprinted past the 2 people. Mo Lien immediately followed after her. With this delay, Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty had caught up. Blinking her eyes, Qi Xianxian glanced at Ni Hanji, who was groaning softly while holding her hand. She looked at her curiously. Ni Hanji's finger bones were broken, and her fingers were connected to her heart. She was in so much pain that she shed tears. Seeing Qi Xianxian looking at her curiously, she couldn't help but shout, what are you looking at? Qi Xianxian pursed her lips and ran over with Little Fatty. Zhang Mingqiu couldn't help but shout, hey, classmate, you can't go up. Qi Xianxian waved her hand and said, anyway, letting 1 or 4 people go is the same. You're all going to be unlucky. Zhang Mingqiu blinked. That makes sense. Master. Ni Hanji was so angry that she pulled Hewen's hand. The royal school treats its guests so well. I want to go up and ask that Principal Yun how he teaches his students. Chapter 3980. His Excellency Hewen couldn't help but sigh. With his disciple's temper, she would probably only be fine on Medicine King Island with his protection. If she went out alone, who knew how many hidden losses she would suffer. Ni Hanji helped His Excellency Hewen up, leaving Zhang Mingqiu and Lu Pinwen looking at each other again, speechless. Putting 1 was the same as putting 6, it was the same as putting 1. After Arbor mobilized the spatial power in her body, her speed was equal to Prince Mo's. The 2 of them reached the top of the back mountain in a flash. They saw a pine forest rustling in front of them. A low and steady voice drifted into their ears along with the wind. In a moment of thought, a paradise is born. When flowers bloom and see Buddha, they hear Buddha's teachings. Buddha's wisdom is enlightened, and all living beings are enlightened. The deathly white paper money on the ground floated into the air and gently swirled in the wind. Arbor felt her heart tighten for some reason, and she bit her lip subconsciously. Unknowingly, the sound of her footsteps became slightly lower. Stepping on the pine needles, her long white robe slid across the ground, the light gauze fluttering, and the sleeves of her robe fluttered. Her gaze fell on the front, and the grave pit had been covered by a large amount of sand. The sand on the ground slowly fell to the ground with the shovel of the shovel. Apart from Yun Piaomiao, Arbor actually saw Yun Fiang and several teachers from the top academy. What were they standing there for? Who were they burying? Arbor immediately felt her mind in a mess, and it was noisy. Her gaze only stared at the grave pit with sand swirling in the air for a long time. For a moment, she felt as if her throat was blocked by something, and it was so dry that she couldn't even make a sound. Yun Piaomiao, Yun Fiang, and the others turned their heads one after another, and when they saw her, they were slightly stunned. Arbor suddenly quickened her pace and rushed in front of Yun Piaomiao and Yun Fiang. Who are you burying? Why aren't you talking? Who are you burying? Who are you burying? The little girl stared straight at the two with red eyes, her gaze sharp and fierce. Talk! Talk! She shouted at the top of her lungs. Jojo! Mo Lien quickly chased after her and reached out to pull her into his arms. He stroked her head to comfort her. Jojo, don't be so agitated. How could he not be excited? In this inexplicable moment, the intense telepathy made her realize something. The person buried inside, perhaps it was very important to her, very important. Yun Fiang turned to look at Yun Piaomiao and frowned slightly, as if blaming him for bringing the child here. Yun Piaomiao lowered her eyes and said calmly, although it's painful to accept the truth, I think that Peak Master Murong would be gratified to have Jojo send her on her last journey. What are you talking about? Very inexplicably, Xiao Mu actually felt that she was unable to control her emotions at this moment. She allowed the tears to rush out of her eyes and crash down one by one without any warning. She simply could not hold them back. He couldn't stop himself. Her vision was blurry and her body was on the verge of collapsing. What nonsense are you talking about? What do you mean by knowing in the underworld? Where is Murong Sun? She's only missing. She's not dead. Yun Piaomiao and Yun Fiang's gazes landed on her, and they didn't say anything for a long time. She's not dead. Arbor said resolutely. Your master has already been laid to rest, Yun Fiang said softly. This is the truth. Don't run away anymore. Chapter 3981. That's why I can't even see her one last time. You all want to deprive me of that. Tears streamed down her cheeks and rolled down her cheeks. Arbor choked with sobs and questioned word by word, based on what? Based on what? You won't even let me see her one last time. Based on what? I can't see anyone while I'm alive. You can't see her corpse even if you're dead. Based on what can you treat me like this? Jojo. Mo Lien couldn't help but hug her with heartache when she saw her face scrunched up in pain. She looked at the Yun brothers accusingly. Open the coffin. Yun Fiang wearily closed his eyes. Asun has already been laid to rest. Open the coffin. If you won't open it, I'll do it. Mo Lien flicked her sleeve and sent the workers filling in the soil flying. A gust of wind from her palm swept over and pushed the pile of soil out of the grave. Yun Fiang sighed and faintly said, So what if I see her? Great Master Wu Yen also sighed and softly said, Silly child. Qi Xian, the little fatty, Sir Hewan, Ni Hanji, and the others had just run over when they saw a shocking scene in front of them. They saw a large lacquered wooden coffin being sucked out of the grave and landing heavily on the ground. The coffin lid flew up with a whoosh and landed on the ground with a bang. Arbor dashed forward and saw a crystal coffin floating in the air. Mo Lien gently waved her hand and it slowly landed in front of her. Separated by the crystal coffin, this was Arbor's second time seeing Murong Sun in 4 years. She wore a purple robe and had gentle features. A faint, serene smile hung on her beautiful face. She looked like she was in a deep sleep. Her eyes were gently closed and her radiance was restrained. The only thing that remained was the faint traces left behind by time. Murong Sun Arbor crawled forward and laid on top of her crystal coffin. His small hand gently caressed the icy cold white crystal as he murmured, "Murong Sun, you big liar." She gently pushed open the crystal coffin lid and reached out to touch her bone-chilling cheek. Large droplets of tears splashed onto Murong Sun's forehead. "Murong Sun," Arbor quietly murmured, "we've settled down at Rosy Cloud's Peak. Second Martial Uncle is here too. Everyone is here. If we rebuild the Holy Water Sect, we definitely won't disappoint the old sect master's hopes. As long as I live, the Holy Water Sect will definitely be well. With this disciple here, the Holy Water Sect will definitely exist for all eternity and flourish." "Master," Arbor murmured. "Don't you regret it? Don't you feel that your life is lacking if you can't personally witness the Holy Water Sect's resurgence?" "Master, Master," the little girl called out in a trembling voice, "Master, Master, Master. Jojo is here. Master, Master. Can you open your eyes and take a look at Jojo? Master, Master, Master." Arbor's arms tightened and tightly hugged Murong Sun. Qi Xian couldn't resist using her sleeve to wipe her tears. This was the first time she saw Jojo crying like a tearful person. He choked on his sobs and couldn't speak. She had always thought that Sir Jojo was a little person made of iron. However, in reality, there was a fragile existence in this little fellow's heart. Mo Lien crouched next to her and gently stroked the little girl's head. She softly said, "Jojo, Master has already left. Let's bury her." Chapter 3982. Arbor shook her head in refusal and refused to let go of Murong Sun's hand. She turned to look at Mo Lien with tears in her eyes. She dazedly said, "Lien, Murong Sun is dead." Mo Lien nodded and grasped her icy hand. "Let's let her rest in peace, okay?" Arbor shook her head and stubbornly said, "She lied to me." Mo Lien's heart wrenched as she looked at her tear-streaked face. She reached out to touch her tear-stained face. "She's a liar." Arbor nodded. "She is a liar. She said she would always be by my side. She said that when I became successful in the future, I would protect her and let her do whatever she wanted no matter where she went. She's a liar. And she said she never lied to me." Mo Lien sighed and wiped away the glistening tears on her cheeks. "Jojo." Arbor hugged Murong Sun and sat there without moving. She sniffled and hugged Murong Sun's head, softly murmuring, "Master, I'll take you back to Holy Water Sect, okay?" "Jojo." Yun Fei sighed. "Ah Sun has already left. Let her leave in peace." Arbor suddenly looked up and stared at him. The 1,000-year phoenix wood that Yun Piaomiao was looking for was to refine the soul-returning pill for Master. Yun Fei nodded. "After the battle at Holy Water Sect, when I rushed to Holy Water Peak, your master was already at her last gasp. Not long after she returned, Yun Fei cast his eyes down. So I sealed her in an ice coffin and temporarily stabilized her soul. I did everything I could to refine the soul-returning pill to prolong her life." "Then why did you hide it from Jojo?" Mo Lien couldn't resist shouting at Yun Fei. "Don't you know how good Jojo's pill refining skills are? Although Jojo's alchemy skills are top-notch, he's still young after all." Yun Piaomiao couldn't help but interject, "The soul-returning pill is a sage-level pill. Even though we invited the divine grade alchemist, His Excellency He Wen, to produce it, we still failed in the end. Although the soul-returning pill was successful, the quality was not pure enough, so, silly. Mo Yen shouted angrily and lowered his head to look at his wife. The little girl looked like she had suffered a huge blow, and her tears soundlessly flowed onto Murong Sun's face. If she had asked Yun Piaomiao clearly that day in the Phoenix Wood Forest. Or, if they insisted on not giving him the herbs, they would force him to spit out the truth. Would there be a way out for today's matter? After failing to take the soul-returning pill, there was no hope at all. Do you know? Mo Lien took a deep breath and said, Xiao Qiao successfully concocted a resurrection pill earlier and already saved our royal mother. Yun Fei's eyes suddenly widened, and his body swayed slightly. Yun Piaomiao looked at him in shock and instinctively denied, that's impossible. That's right, don't lie. That's simply impossible. Ni Hanji, who was clutching her severed finger, couldn't help but interject at this moment. She proudly rolled her eyes and said, even my master, a divine grade pill master, couldn't refine a good quality soul-returning pill. How is that possible? Mo Lien coldly swept a glance at her, successfully intimidating this peacock that opened her mouth and made her timidly close her mouth. The truth is that Mother Queen took the soul-returning pill and has already woken up. Yun Fei's eyes widened in disbelief. Chapter 3983. His expression was a bit bitter, and he turned his head like a mechanical puppet to look at the silent arbor. Is that so, Jojo? Xiao Mu hugged Murong Sun and sat there in a daze. For a moment, it seemed like she couldn't hear or see who was talking to her. Isn't Jojo an Earth-level alchemist? Before we went to Phoenix Grove, Jojo had already advanced to a heaven-level alchemist. But a heaven-level alchemist is worlds apart from a god-level alchemist, Yun Piaomiao could not help but weakly say. Although it was only a difference of one major realm, it was like a natural chasm that was difficult to cross, all right? Mo Lien lowered her eyes and sighed deeply. Why do you have to keep it to yourselves when you encounter a problem and not discuss it with others? It's because this heaven-level alchemist, Jojo, created a resurrection pill a few days ago. If you don't believe me, you can follow us back to Dragon Flame City to see my mother's current condition. Yun Xiong nearly lost his balance and was about to fall to the side. When Zhou Danjin saw this, he hastily went up with several other mentors to support him. Sir He Wen, who had heard everything from beginning to end, was shocked beyond belief. A heaven-grade alchemist had leapfrogged ranks to challenge the soul-returning pill, and had succeeded, and had really brought the person back to life. This was unheard of, all right. Let alone his disciple, Ni Hanji, who did not believe it, even he did not dare to believe that this was true. Then can she still be saved? Mentor Wei Wei could not help but anxiously ask. Arbor dazedly hugged Murong Sun and did not say anything or look up. She merely lowered her head, thinking about something. Mo Lien knew that she was upset, so she pried her hand away and gently consoled, Jojo, let's put Master in the coffin, all right? Arbor hugged Murong Sun, unwilling to let go. She seemed to have heard Mo Lien talking to her, but in reality, she could not react at all. She only felt that her entire body was stiff and her mind was in a mess. It was as if there were countless voices ringing in her head, but it also felt as if there was no sound at all. Murong Sun died because she, this disciple, was useless and could not save her master. Even if he were to refine the soul-returning pill now, it would be useless. One could only take one soul-returning pill in one's lifetime. If it failed, it would be a complete failure. Otherwise, if a person could come back from the dead many times, wouldn't the heavenly Tao also become chaotic? In any case, as long as the corpse wasn't destroyed, a single pill would be enough to revive the dead, right? Arbor sat there in a daze, hugging his master without saying a word. He was in a daze. Mo Lien involuntarily panicked and she saw Murong Sun's condition. She hastily shook Murong Sun's petite body and recklessly pried Murong Sun away from her arms. She then pulled her pitiful wifey into her embrace. Jojo, Jojo. Don't be afraid, don't worry, I'm here for you. How about we seal Master's body in the star domain first? Mo Lien whispered into her ear, we'll think of another way to revive her for the rest of our lives, okay? Arbor's eyes stung. She felt like there were no more tears left for her to shed. Can we? She asked meekly. Definitely. Mo Lien nodded heavily. He hugged his wifey and asked with heartache, you don't trust hubby? Arbor shook her head. I do. Chapter 3984. At night, Mo Lien walked out of a room in Winter Forest Garden and closed the door behind her. She glanced at Yun Fei and the others who were standing in the courtyard. Let Jojo have a good rest. Mo Lien's voice was very light. The little fellow had just finished refining the soul-returning pill and immediately rushed back to the academy. After receiving such a huge blow, she had to be given some time to recover. Yun Fei opened his mouth. Ah Suns, just leave Peak Master Murong's ice crystal coffin to us. Mo Lien interrupted Yun Fei's words with an indifferent expression. But, Principal Yun, I know you have good intentions. Mo Lien interrupted him again. But you can't deny that because of this decision, you missed the best time to save Peak Master Murong. If you were willing to wait, or trust Jojo a little more, perhaps things wouldn't have become as troublesome as they are now. This little friend. Sir He-Wen, who had been silent and following behind the crowd, couldn't help but ask, that lady, with the standard of a heaven-grade alchemist, she really refined the soul-returning pill? How was that possible? That was a saint elixir. Even if the phoenix flower was added to the sacred medicine refined by a divine-grade alchemist to increase the success rate to 100%, but the pill that came out of the furnace was still of poor quality. Could a heaven-grade alchemist surpass a divine-grade alchemist in refining? Just thinking about it made it seem impossible. Mo Lien glanced at alchemist He-Wen and said coldly, in this world, what we don't lack the most are geniuses. What you can't do doesn't mean that Jojo can't do. Everyone was silent. But Mo Lien's attitude of not paying any attention to alchemist He-Wen angered his disciple, Ni Hanji. You, how can you say that? Ni Hanji couldn't help but say angrily. When they were at the back mountain of the Royal Academy, this man had swept his cold and terrifying gaze over her. That kind of attitude of not paying any attention to the master and disciple made Ni Hanji so angry that she couldn't help but grit her teeth. Hanji. He-Wen sighed softly, stopping his disciple from continuing. This old man has thought of a remedy. I hope that when the little girl wakes up tomorrow, I can discuss it with her in detail. Everyone, please return. Mo Lien nodded coldly. Under the dim light of dusk, Yun Piaomiao and the others felt that the young man in front of them had clear and cold features, as cold as snow. His entire body seemed to be wrapped in a thin layer of mist that was as faint as smoke, cold, lofty, and unapproachable. Knowing that the anger in his heart was unbearable, Yun Fiang and Yun Piaomiao couldn't help but close their eyes. They nodded and turned to leave the courtyard listlessly. Yun Fei didn't know how he returned to the courtyard. He sat in front of the small table in a daze and stared at the cup of herbal tea on the table. The bitterness in his heart was unbearable. Xiao Mu slept all the way until noon the next day. Lifting the thin satin covering her body, the little girl sat on the edge of the bed expressionlessly, in a daze. Yesterday's events were still vivid in his mind. After 4 years, she saw Murong Sun again, but it was in that icy coffin. Murong Sun was silently lying there without breathing. She didn't know if this counted as seeing her again. The door to the room was pushed open from the outside with a creak. Mo Lien's slender figure stood against the light at the door. When he saw her sitting on the edge of the bed in a daze, he smiled. You're awake. Arbor abruptly stood up and ran a few steps before abruptly throwing herself into his arms. Chapter 3985. Mo Lien reached out and caught her warm body. He lifted her up and rubbed against her cheek. "Why are you in a daze so early in the morning? Are you thinking about your husband?" This hug really turned all his gentleness into a drizzle, messing up his heart and blinding his eyes. What a troublesome little girl. Arbor raised her little head and blinked. She reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck, snuggling into his embrace. "I don't want to go anywhere these few days. I don't want to see anyone. Is that all right?" She just wanted to be so willful for once. She didn't want to hear, think, or see anyone. She just wanted to focus on herself for a few days. "Okay." Mo Lien nodded slightly and patted her head. "Do whatever you want to do. There's no need to have any scruples." Yun Fei and Yun Piaomiao immediately received the news that Donglin Garden had closed its doors and refused to see anyone. He Wen, who had been turned away, could only sigh deeply when he saw the situation. "Master, they don't even want to see us. Why do we still have to come knocking on their doors? Weren't they rushing to be turned away?" Ni Hanji couldn't help but feel angry. "I also have an unshirkable responsibility for this matter," Hewen said in a low voice. "Master." Ni Hanji stomped her feet. "Your disciple said that we shouldn't have accepted this matter in the first place. Look at the situation now. Instead, we've been blamed by others." Hewen lowered his eyes slightly. In fact, he also had his own selfish motives. When he heard that the other party had gathered all the ingredients and asked him to refine the soul-returning pill, he naturally couldn't wait to come over and try. If he could successfully refine the soul-returning pill on this trip, then he Wen, would be the unparalleled #1 saint-level alchemist in the world. However, when he thought of this, Hewen couldn't help but laugh bitterly at himself. "Hanji, bring me a brush and paper." "Master," Ni Hanji called out indignantly. Hewen sighed and glanced at her. Ni Hanji had no other choice but to obediently hand over the brush and paper. Hewen drew a plant on a small stone table at the entrance and noted its name and use. Then, he folded the paper and put it into the faith. "This is what I saw in an old and tattered ancient book. I hope it will be of some help to that little friend. Master, shall we leave this lousy academy today?" Hewen glanced at her again. Ni Hanji pouted mischievously. "Master will return to the guest court to prepare. You can deliver the letter." "All right, Master, don't worry. Your disciple will definitely complete the mission." Ni Hanji nodded with a smile. After Hewen left, Ni Hanji snorted and pulled the paper out of the envelope with a pout. He took out a pen and added a few more leaves and a small stamen on the picture of the plant. She then chuckled and put down the pen. After putting the paper back into the envelope, she flicked her finger across the high wall and threw the letter into the envelope. "Who told you to be so arrogant? You even dared to give us the cold shoulder." Ni Hanji clapped her hands as she talked to herself and turned to leave triumphantly. When she thought of how Mo Lien and Arbor dared to give her and her master the cold shoulder, she felt extremely displeased. There weren't many female disciples in the inner sect of the Medicine King Island. Ni Hanji had always been the moon surrounded by the stars among her fellow disciples. So when she saw Mo Lien's cold attitude towards her, she couldn't help but feel angry. What's there to be arrogant about? Your master ate the pill and couldn't get up, that's her bad luck. Chapter 3986. How dare they vent their anger on Medicine King Island? Did they think that she, Ni Hanji, was a sick cat? Humph, I'll make you suffer the consequences. Ni Hanji followed Hewen and left the Imperial College that day. Sitting in the air transportation spiritual artifact, Ni Hanji was humming a tune in a good mood. Seeing this, Hewen could not help but smile helplessly. Hanji, did leaving the Royal Academy make you so happy? How much did she despise the Imperial College? Hanji stared blankly for a moment, thinking that she had gotten a little carried away. She quickly stuck out her tongue and retracted her expression, giggling as she said, "Isn't that so, Master? Once we left the Imperial Academy, I felt much more relaxed. In that place, I was always disliked by others, and I always gave them a cold shoulder. Only Master, you have a good temper and can take it." In the past, no matter which city they went to, they would always be treated with respect. It was not like the royal school, where no one paid any attention to them. Hewen shook his head helplessly and started reading the medical book in his hand again. Hanji asked with a smile, "Master, are we returning to Medicine King Island now?" Hewen shook his head and closed the book. He smiled at his disciple. "Let's go to the Imperial capital. The Lin family invited us to make a few spirit breakthrough pills. The income is quite good." Hewen said with a smile, "The Lin family has been gaining momentum recently. Ever since they moved from Chengdu to the Imperial capital, they have steadily become one of the 6 great aristocratic families. To be able to build a good relationship with the Lin family was something worth Medicine King Island doing." Hanji curled her lips in disdain. "What are the 6 great aristocratic families? Can they be compared to our Medicine King Island? I heard that the aristocratic families in the imperial capital are having a hard time. They are being suppressed by the imperial court to the point that they can't breathe. Didn't the Long family have a direct descendant who was suppressed and thrown into prison? Although the entire family managed to escape in the end, they gave up all their assets in the imperial capital and fled with their tails between their legs. That tragic scene must have been very wretched." Hewen looked at his disciple and stroked her head. "Imperial power is naturally supreme in the imperial capital. Hanji, you have to rein in your willful temper," Hewen said helplessly. He had brought this disciple of his by his side since she was young. Rather than calling her a disciple, it would be more accurate to say that he had taken care of her like his own granddaughter. She was young, so Hewen naturally indulged her more. Furthermore, Hewen had always felt that his disciple's temperament was very pure and kind. How could he have known that she would go against his wishes and secretly change the plant drawings he had drawn? The self-righteous Hewen did not know what the consequences would be in the end if he blindly doted on this disciple. Let's not talk about the master and disciple going to the capital. In Arbor, however, they received a letter from Hanji. She sat there and watched silently for a while, not saying anything for a long time. Mo Lien frowned. She took her little hand and asked, "Jojo, could it be that this old man's reputation is false, and that his prescription is actually useless?" Arbor shook his head. "I already know this method. Using the Bodhi Revival grass as the catalyst to create the Bodhi Revival pill, I still need a few other ingredients. This prescription is an extremely ancient one," Arbor said indifferently with furrowed brows. He didn't expect Hewen to know about it. He was indeed capable. Chapter 3987. "Stone flower and the heart of a 10,000-year-old phoenix wood," Arbor said softly. "I already have these 2 materials. The last one is the blood of the blue-eyed 3-headed dog." Arbor lowered his eyes and said aloofly, "This is an ancient ferocious beast. I've only seen it in ancient texts." Mo Lien was startled when she heard that. She lowered her eyes and pondered for a moment. "We saw the blue-eyed 3-headed dog when we were challenging the Tower of Punishment." Arbor was startled and looked at her. "You're saying you fought with it before?" Mo Lien shook her head. "We haven't. It's just that we saw its carving on a stone door when we were challenging the floor's checkpoint." Arbor nodded. "That means the legend isn't completely absurd and baseless. This ferocious beast should exist." Arbor sighed and put down the letter in his hand. "As long as this thing exists in the world, we can find it no matter how difficult it is." Mo Lien grasped his wife's hand and quietly asked, "Why are you still so gloomy when you have a solution?" Arbor shook his head. "Master's soul is shattered and can't hold on for too long. And with her current body," Arbor sighed softly. "She has to first nurture that shattered soul before taking the pill. Otherwise, her body wouldn't be able to endure it at all. Although the blue-eyed three-headed dog existed in the world, it would be extremely difficult to find it in a short period of time. Murong Sun's soul could only hold on for a year at most. Then He Wen's prescription isn't actually useful anymore, right?" Mo Lien asked with a frown. Arbor nodded. "The revival Bodhi grass he drew isn't quite right either. The revival Bodhi grass's leaves are needle-shaped and it never blossoms nor bears fruit." Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh coldly. She wondered if this Master He Wen was someone who fished for fame. Why would he draw a nondescript medicinal plant for Jojo to use as a reference? If Jojo had not seen the herb before, he might have followed the plant map he had given him to find the resurrection Bodhi herb, wouldn't he? In the end, it was a waste of time and a wasted search. "I saw it on the 3rd floor of the Longevity Temple on the main star." After saying that, Arbor abruptly stood up, a look of excitement appearing on his small face. How could I forget? The 2nd floor has many medicines and pills concocted by Ent Master and Master. Perhaps they can be of help to Murong Sun." She paced back and forth in front of Mo Lien with small steps, her small face flushed red from agitation. "Lien, let's go in and take a look." Mo Lien nodded. The two of them left the room and entered the Longevity Temple on the main planet. Arbor pulled Mo Lien and sprinted toward the 2nd floor. Master must have concocted a pill to stabilize the soul. She pulled out a piece of frost jade with the red deity attached to it from her neck. "If it doesn't work, then let's give this piece of soul-calming frost jade to Murong Sun first." The little fellow prattled on as she pulled Mo Lien to the 2nd floor. She headed straight for the rows of cabinets leaning against the wall and rummaged through them. Mo Lien helped her take down the wooden boxes placed on the top 2 floors one by one. Arbor flipped through them and took a box with a large red peony painting from Mo Lien's hands. As soon as she opened the box, a faint medicinal fragrance wafted out. Mo Lien couldn't help but inwardly click her tongue. Jojo's 2 almighty masters were truly extravagant. Every box placed on the cabinets was priceless. Chapter 3988. Arbor's eyes brightened. Soul-nurturing pill. This pill was perfect for Murong Sun to consume. It would nourish her body and imperceptibly repair her soul. At least before she found the cerulean, she could feed Murong Sun 1 pill every half a month so that her soul would not scatter. Murong Sun was severely injured back then and did not receive timely treatment, hence, her condition was actually much more serious than Lien's mother's. "Jojo, are you blaming Headmaster Yun for acting on his own?" Mo Lien could not help but shake Murong Sun's hand when she saw Murong Sun sinking into her own contemplation while holding the pill. Arbor returned to her senses and shook her head at him. "Only incompetent people would blame this and that. I don't blame anyone." She could not blame Yun Fiang for not trusting him and asking for another brilliant pill alchemist from Medicine King Island. After all, Yun Fiang's motive was good and also to save Murong Sun. Moreover, if he did not arrive in time back then and bring Murong Sun back, perhaps Murong Sun would only be left with a head like 3rd Entmaster when she arrived. Arbor could not help but shudder when she thought of this. What right did she have to blame others? It was because she was incompetent as a disciple that she could not help her master. As for Sir He Wen, he was only an outsider to them, so it was already pretty good that an outsider could do this much. Although he had no lack of selfishness in wanting to make a name for himself, how could she force an outsider to do his best for her master? Jojo. Mo Lien's heart ached inwardly, and she hugged the little girl and kissed her. "You're only missing the cerulean's blood now, right? Don't worry, we'll definitely find it." Sometimes, the little girl was so sensible that it made one's heart ache. If she vented her anger on Yun Fiang and He Wan, perhaps she would feel better in her heart. However, she simply disdained to vent her anger on them. Murong Sun was her master, her family, so the little girl shouldered the responsibility of saving Murong Sun alone. Mo Lien lifted her chin and nuzzled her face. The Tower of Punishment was set up by heavenly law. That ferocious beast had already escaped before we escaped. At least, we didn't find it in the remaining stone doors on that floor. That means it ran away long ago. It didn't stay in the Tower of Punishment. As a guardian beast, it ran away. Do you think the heavenly axiom, with its stingy character, will let it go? Xiao Mu blinked her large eyes. What Lien meant was that ferocious beast was definitely hiding in some corner of the world and playing dead right now. Which nook and cranny are we going to find it? Xiao Qiao asked curiously. Mo Lien chuckled. We can put out a warrant for it. Xiao Mu's small chin almost dropped to the ground. Put it on the wanted list. Hunt a ferocious beast. Lord Xiqiao suddenly felt that this beast was so unlucky. It had finally escaped from prison, but now it was suddenly wanted by all 3 provinces. Who could it find to reason with? Mo Lien nodded with a grin. We'll send people to Jiawei City to issue a mission. On the surface, we'll have all the assassins in the underground black market come out to find it. Secretly, we'll mobilize people from the hidden night pavilion to secretly search and gather all the clues to verify their authenticity. When the time comes there will be news. There's another possibility. Mo Lien stroked her wifey's hair and softly said, perhaps it's hiding beside some almighty figure and hiding from heavenly law. Chapter 3989. Lady Jojo blinked her eyes. If that's the case, this ferocious beast might really have found a host and stayed by that person's side to retire. Mo Lien inwardly chuckled and nodded. She looked down at the box in her hands. Let's give it to Master first. Arbor nodded and pocketed several more bottles of nutrient fluid before pulling Mo Lien out of the Hall of Longevity and flying to Paradise Planet. Ever since the star domain advanced to the god domain and the main planet opened up, the time flow on Paradise Planet was equal to the main planet's 12-fold speed. Arbor looked at the ice crystal coffin sitting on the slope of Paradise Planet and crouched next to the open coffin, feeding a soul-nurturing pill into Murong Sun's mouth. Chio. The little tray ant bounced over energetically and circled around Arbor with its head. Arbor handed it a box of pills. From now on, feed one to my master every half a month. The little tray ant naturally nodded and complained, those 3 little puppies have been circling Phoenix Spring all day long. Look at how they've absorbed so many good things, but their bodies haven't improved at all. They're simply wasting their divine power. Arbor was startled and then shook his head. Let them be. The little tray ant harumphed and stomped along with its little master while hugging the box. It then complained, they're too noisy, so I threw them into the mine. Arbor, as long as they didn't run to the main planet and destroy her little courtyard, it had nothing to do with Sir Jojo. Arbor and Mo Lien left the star domain and returned to Donglin Court's wing. Arbor glanced at the letter that fell to the ground and shook his head. It's useless. Mo Lien was a bit angry when she saw the herbs drawn on it and directly burned the paper. What god-rank pill refiner from Medicine King Island? You're simply fishing for fame. Mo Lien said angrily, since you don't even know what that saint-grade medicinal plant looks like, why do you have to go the extra mile and draw it? Arbor's eyes flashed for a moment before he felt relieved. Don't worry about him. When are we going to Jiawei City to announce the news? Today. Mo Lien raised her eyebrows and took out her communication jade talisman. Prince Mo's spies could be said to be all over the world. He even had spies in Song Prefecture's Phoenix Emperor City. How could he not have spies in a no-man's land like Jiawei City? After releasing the news, Mo Lien turned her head and winked at Arbor. She smiled and said, Joe City will soon be in chaos because of this news. What are your conditions? 100 million spirit coins. Xiao Mu swallowed her saliva. Wow, it really is His Highness the Crown Prince, who is filthy rich and overbearing. The bait he set out was so enticing, so how could it not attract so many of Joe City's warriors, who scrambled to be the first to come out in search of ferocious beasts? 2 days later, not to mention the entire Joe City, even the imperial court of the upper 3 prefectures was shocked by this news. A mysterious person offered a sky-high price of 100 million spirit coins to buy a living cerulean 3-headed dog. All the mercenary teams and adventurer teams on the continent were in an uproar. Everyone began to go to the various adventure holy lands together to search for traces of this ferocious beast. Chaotic news flooded the channels set up by the hidden night pavilion like snowflakes. 20 days later. Dragon Flame City, in the newly opened Lin family restaurant. Many diners were talking about this big event that shook the 3 prefectures. Chapter 3990. Arbor and Mo Lien stayed in the academy to cultivate in seclusion and did not see anyone. They only chatted with Yun Fiang and Yun Piaomiao before leaving the academy. Speaking of saving Murong Sun, Arbor naturally hoped that he would be given full authority to handle this matter. Yun Fiang was deeply affected, so he naturally could not stop the little girl. He only told her to tell him whatever she needed and dejectedly left Donglin Court. Although the little girl did not blame him at all from beginning to end, he still could not get over the hurdle of self-blame in his heart. It was not impossible for him to walk out from this blow. As long as Murong Sun woke up, the knot in everyone's hearts would naturally be completely resolved. I will definitely save Master. Arbor secretly said this in his mind. 20 days later, Arbor and Mo Lien leisurely returned to Dragon Flame City. When they arrived at Kaidai Veranda's entrance, they discovered that the Lin family restaurant had opened across the street at some point in time. Arbor called out to Manager Hu immediately ran out and beamed from ear to ear. Crown Prince, Crown Princess, you're here. Quickly invite them in. Arbor saw that his Kaidai veranda was still packed with guests. When he saw the diners all standing up to greet him, he waved his hand and said, no need to be so courteous. Sit down and continue eating. Everyone hastily thanked him before sitting down with a smile. Arbor and Mo Lien did not disturb them and followed Manager Hu to a private room on the 2nd floor. On the way there, Arbor purposely looked at the rooms on the 2nd floor. He saw that the rooms were already occupied by guests and there was not a single empty room. It was clear that business was still flourishing. It was actually almost past mealtime right now, so other restaurants could not compare to having such good business. Arbor sat down and scooted over to the Crown Prince, who was fanning himself, to enjoy the cool breeze. He also asked curiously, Old Hu, the Lin family restaurant that opened across the street can't be the Lin family I'm thinking of, right? Why did they name it so casually? Old Hu was attentively entertaining the two of them, asking the waiters to quickly serve up some of their signature dishes. She rolled her eyes and said, who else could it be? Wasn't it the Lin family from Rome City? Hee. They've been fighting with our Kaidai loft for 7 days now. Speaking of this, shopkeeper who had a belly full of anger. Every day, there are special discounts, and they even go around the streets to recruit people. Hey, they even found a few good-looking young men from Spring Full House to flirt with those ants. He recruited all of them. Mo Lien, looking at Old Hu's belly full of anger, he probably had been holding it in for more than a day or two. But I saw it just now. Our business is still good. Of course. When Old Hu mentioned this, his face was filled with pride and joy as he said, can other people eat our Kaidai veranda's dish, the holy rice? Even if she pulled a few naked people over to lie in front of their door, they might not be able to compete with us. Old Hu spoke sneakily, only to realize that the crown prince glanced at him indifferently after he finished speaking. He hurriedly raised his hand to slap his mouth and chuckled. This old servant misspoke. How could he say such vulgar words in front of the little crown princess? No wonder the crown prince glared at him. As they spoke, they heard the sound of gongs and drums from across the street. The little crown princess excitedly leaned against the window to take a look. The scenery on the other side looks a little familiar. Chapter 3991. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, purple. 7 figures that were as thin as lightning stood at the entrance of the Lin family restaurant, immediately causing the young ladies and young wives on the street to scream. Ya, whoa 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 whoa. A bunch of ear-piercing sounds instantly rushed into Arbor's ears. The little fellow subconsciously covered her ears with her hands, but her gaze fell on the 7 figures in front of the restaurant across the street. She seemed to be deep in thought. Ha! Prince Mo's cool laughter suddenly sounded in her ears. Very nice to see. Sir Jojo turned around and looked at him blankly. Who? Mo Lien pursed her lips, secretly suppressing the urge to laugh. Red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, purple. After parting last year and meeting again today, don't you think it's nice to see them? The little girl turned her head and looked at the 7 figures in front of the Lin family restaurant. I know them. This time, it was Prince Mo's turn to be a little stunned. That's right, the little fellow's memory of miscellaneous matters was not very deep. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but secretly laugh. Humph, of course he wouldn't remind her who these people were. At the entrance of the restaurant next door, there was a 50% discount sign. It led the passing women and young ladies into the restaurant, making a lot of noise. Arbor propped up her little chin with one hand and asked shopkeeper Hu doubtfully, Old Hu, do they do this every day? Isn't that so? Speaking of this Lin family restaurant, Old Hu had countless things to complain about. What's the use of lowering the price every day? Can they attract business with just a few beauties? Shopkeeper Hu said angrily, if the quality of the dishes doesn't improve, people will still only recognize our Kai-Dai restaurant. Arbor nodded with her chin in her hand. Suddenly, she tugged at Mo Lien's sleeve. Look at that. Mo Lien reluctantly looked over and saw that there was a sudden commotion at the entrance of the Lin family restaurant. A familiar-looking woman found another person on the street to put on a show of martial arts and suddenly started fighting. As they fought, the flower stand that was originally set up at the entrance was suddenly pushed to the ground. The bouquet of flowers scattered all over the ground. The 7 beauties also cried out and scattered in all directions. Arbor rolled his eyes and couldn't bear to watch. This idiot Mu Dongni picked a fight with someone on the street and made the Mu family lose face. Just as she was about to close the window and stop watching this farce, she suddenly saw a green-clothed beauty among the 7 beauties looking up at her. This was nothing much, but the beauty's eyes suddenly lit up. She waved at him and even pulled the other 6 beauties beside her. The 7 of them looked at her in unison. Immediately, they stretched out their claws and waved them at her, shouting at her excitedly. Xiao Mu creased her brows and looked at them in bewilderment. What the hell? These people did look familiar, but she couldn't remember where she had seen them before. On the other side, Mu Dongni was gradually getting angry with that woman. Suddenly, she turned to look in her direction and was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she received a fierce slap on the face and immediately yelled hatefully, Gu Daozhen, you dare to slap this old lady's face? You must be tired of living. Arbor looked coldly at Mu Dongni, who had overstepped her bounds, and said grumpily, send a message to old Master Mu and have him send someone to take her back. As soon as her voice fell, one of the women fiercely pulled out a 7-foot-long sword and stabbed at Mu Dongni. Chapter 3992. Fuck, these 2 people were viciously brawling on the streets. Not only did their fight hurt the eyes, but they were even pointing their swords at each other now. What kind of deep-seated hatred was this? Did they need to do this? Arbor flicked her finger, and a jade porcelain wine cup bounced off Gu Daojian's longsword with a whoosh as swift as a clap of thunder. The latter only felt her wrist go numb, and the sword in her hand immediately fell to the ground with a clang. Prince Mo couldn't resist face-palming. He swiftly reached out to grab it, but he only caught a strand of his wifey's sleeve that floated past his fingers. The little girl directly jumped down from Kaidai Pavilion's window and flew to Mu Dongni and Gu Daojian. Mu Dongni looked back and scrambled to her side, shouting in alarm, "Niece! Beat her up! Beat this stinking, shameless old hag to death!" When Gu Daojian heard this, her face instantly darkened, and she turned to yell at Mu Dongni, "Nothing good comes out of a filthy mouth. Who's an old hag? You're the old hag. Don't forget, you're a year older than me. Eldest niece, look at this old hag. She actually said that about us." Mu Dongni was just about to howl when the little stoic glared at her icily. She suddenly felt like she didn't dare to howl anymore, useless thing. Arbor swept her a disdainful glance before her gaze landed on Gu Daojian, sizing her up. Gu Daojian was also in a very sorry state after fighting with Mu Dongni just now. Not only was her left eye bruised, but the corner of her mouth was also scratched by Mu Dongni's sharp nails. No wonder she was so angry that she drew her sword and wanted to stab Mu Dongni to death. Arbor restrained her temper and asked with a cold expression, "What is it?" Mu Dongni immediately felt like she had found a backer, so she quickly crawled over and wailed, "It's all because of this old hag who maliciously tried to steal my Meng Meng. Meng Meng is mine. Meng Meng." Arbor only felt that Mu Dongni's crying was an eyesore, so he impatiently yelled at her, "What are you crying for? Speak properly." Mu Dongni immediately stopped sobbing and pretended to wipe her tears. She stole a glance at Gu Daojian and said in a low voice, "Gu Daojian clearly knew that I wanted to redeem Meng Meng, but she still jumped out to compete with me. Tell me, how evil is this old woman?" Arbor asked expressionlessly, "Who is Dreamy?" I know. That beauty in green ran to the little stoic's side with a grin. "He's talking about one of our spring house's top young brothers, Fan Meng." Arbor cast a sideways glance at the green-clothed beauty before turning his cold little face to Mu Dongni. "Didn't you say you wanted to redeem the top performer of the Despondent Pavilion a while ago? What's his name again?" Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Kai Xiu, who had caught up, could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. She stepped forward and whispered, "The ace of the Chen family troupe, Brother Rong." "Oh." Arbor nodded expressionlessly. She turned to point at Mu Dongni and grumpily reprimanded, "How can you be so fickle?" Mu Dongni looked dumbfoundedly at this eldest niece of hers. It wasn't good to talk about this here, right on the side. The one-eyed Gu Daojian couldn't help but chuckle and gloat, "She's not just fickle, she simply loves whoever she sees." Mu Dongni's face darkened, and she angrily kicked Gu Daojian. "What nonsense are you spouting? Who's fickle?" Chapter 3993. Ever since I saw my Meng Meng. Mu Dongni revealed a dreamy and blissful expression. "I knew I found my true love. My heart belongs to someone. I can definitely grow old with my Meng Meng in the future. I'll destroy whoever dares to snatch Meng Meng from me." Mu Dongni bared her teeth and turned to roar at Gu Daojian. She then scrambled over to Qiao Mu and tugged at the corner of her skirt. "Eldest niece, you must help me. You must help me. Second great aunt." Mu Dongni turned her head and saw Zhan Ju rushing over with 7 to 8 elderly nannies and pulling her up from the ground in a flurry. "Second great aunt, don't make a fuss. Your matter has already reached the elderly sir's ears. Hurry and come back with us." I'm not going back. Mu Dongni yelled angrily and stretched out her leg to kick Gu Daojian. Gu Daozhen, I'm telling you, you're not allowed to compete with me at the spring gathering tomorrow night. Gu Daozhen gave her a "who cares about you" expression and glared at her. Eldest niece, help me. Help me, eldest niece. Mu Dongmi shrieked as she kicked her leg. Arbor expressionlessly watched her figure being dragged far away. She took out a handkerchief and leisurely wiped her clothes where she had grabbed. She turned around and burned the handkerchief to ashes. Everyone was stupefied. How can someone from the Mu family be this stupid? The little stoic shook her head and was about to move when someone reached out to stop her. What is it? Arbor glanced indifferently at the man in green blocking her path. That guy waved his hand in front of her and said with a grin, "Little stoic, long time no see. If you're free tomorrow, why don't you come visit our spring gathering pavilion?" MHM. The man in blue also ran up and blinked his large eyes at her. Our pavilion is holding a spring gathering tomorrow. There will be all kinds of good performances. It's going to be lively. The little stoic faced the crowd with a stoic expression. I'm not free. Before she could open her mouth, a deep voice drifted over from behind her, directly rejecting the offer on her behalf. Xiao Mu blinked, but before she could turn around, she was pulled back into a certain person's embrace by a hand. The green-clothed beauty curled her lips and stole a glance at Mo Lien with an aggrieved expression. This young master, why are you so fierce? Mo Lien glared fiercely at him. This bastard actually dared to lure his wife to such a foul place like the spring-filled house. The little stoic turned to look at her husband's huff and puff and tugged at his finger. Let's go home. Her husband didn't seem to like the colors red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. If that was the case, then Jojo did not want to see them. In any case, they weren't familiar with each other. It was just a chance encounter. Husband, I remember now. We also encountered these people when we were on Seikong Planet, right? Who would have thought that a small gambling den could actually operate in the upper 3 prefectures? The boss of this whatever spring house was probably a rather impressive figure. Mo Lien looked down at her and said with a grin, that's right. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Aren't they beautiful? Arbor quickly shook his head and swiftly added, they're not as beautiful as Duan. Prince Mo's handsome face completely darkened what was going on with his wifey always using Duan as a standard. Could this habit be changed? Chapter 3994. Speaking of Duan, Jojo had been busy searching for the blue-eyed three-headed dog's blood recently because of Master's matter. Aside from cultivating in seclusion in the academy, the two devoted themselves to the matter of the blood. Duan matter had indeed been delayed. Mo Lien grasped Arbor's hand. Something happened on Duan side. Arbor was startled. What happened? Mo Lien organized her thoughts and planned to make a long story short to tell her wife about Duan side. However, she saw Hao Fei rushing over with her entourage and visibly sighing in relief when she saw the two of them. Hao Fei dismounted from her horse and strode forward. She quickly cupped her hands and greeted, greetings to Crown Prince and Crown Princess. You two have finally returned. Crown Princess, Heavenly Pill Auction received a letter from Zhangzhou's Prince Chen more than 10 days ago. The various physicians in the auction repeatedly examined the items Prince Chen sent and did not find any problems. Mo Lien and Arbor took the reins from the manservant and followed Hao Fei to Heavenly Pill Auction. At the entrance of the Lin family's restaurant, the 7 flowers looked at each other. Their bright eyes looked at each other. On the other side, the young couple soon arrived at the southern part of the city. The two of them followed Hao Fei through the door and happened to bump into Fairy Huang He. Huang He's eyes brightened, and she exclaimed in pleasant surprise, Jojo, you're back. Arbor nodded and jogged over. She patted her and asked, Little Huang He, how have you been recently? Pretty good. She would refine pills in her free time and occasionally enter closed-door cultivation to cultivate. Her days were too comfortable. Most importantly, she had someone to chat with. Xiao Mu nodded upon hearing this and was led inside by the two people. Soon, Fairy Yellow Crane accompanied her into a small, independent alchemy room. In this small alchemy room, in addition to the alchemy furnace that was half the height of a person, there was also a bamboo rack that was used to store medicinal herbs. Fairy Yellow Crane took down an item wrapped in a square handkerchief from the top of the shelf. She carefully opened it and used a pair of tweezers to take out a fingernail. Arbor's face sank. He summoned the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron, took the fingernail, and began to examine it. Not long after, Fairy Yellow Crane accompanied Arbor out of the pill room. Prince Mo was sitting in the inner hall, quietly drinking tea. When he saw the two of them come out, he stood up and asked, "How is it?" Yellow Crane Fairy clenched her fists angrily. Jojo found out. It's the poison of the soul-devouring flower. This substance is completely colorless and odorless when mixed with the rouge and powder used by the human body. If it is applied for a long time, it will imperceptibly poison the person. Only at a certain point in time, we can use the primer to completely detonate it, and the person will die silently. Fairy Yellow Crane said angrily, "Too despicable. This soul-devouring flower was completely useless against Shouja. It can only bully mortal women." Mo Lien silently lowered her eyes. It was not important whether it was useful to other people. It was enough that it could strike a blow to Duan Yu. If it is applied for a long time? Mo Lien asked softly, could it be that they were targeted the moment they returned to Tsang province? And Duan Yu's mother was poisoned? Seeing Arbor's silence, Fairy Yellow Crane nodded and said, "It should be so. If one ingests a little bit of this thing every day, its medicinal properties are not enough to take a person's life. It would take at least half a year or more. Human hearts are vicious." Fairy Yellow Crane clenched her fists. Chapter 3995. Fairy Yellow Crane shook her head and sighed. Whose path can a mortal woman obstruct? The little stoic small face was grim, and her eyes were brimming with bone-chilling chilliness. That guy must have been feeling terrible recently, right? She could empathize with the loss of his closest mother. How was he doing right now? Mo Lien pulled her small hand and said softly, "I've already sent people to inquire. That guy has been staying on Lonely Mountain's Imperial Mausoleum this past month. However, I heard that the Tsangzhou Emperor suddenly fainted during a royal court session the day before yesterday. His health, however, is deteriorating with each passing day. Empress Lu, the second prince, and the third prince's mother are fighting fiercely in the harem," Mo Lien said aloofly as she set down the teacup in her hand. "The royal court is also in a constant state of turmoil. The current Tsangzhou has Eagle City's zombies causing chaos on the outside, while the courtiers and palace concubines are fighting endlessly on the inside. I'm afraid that once the Tsangzhou Emperor dies, Ming Province will make a move against them." It was impossible for him not to take a bite out of such a big piece of fat meat. Arbor paced back and forth in front of Mo Lien with her small paws behind her back. "How about we make a trip there?" Mo Lien shook her head. "We shouldn't go and add to the chaos. Duan Yu will definitely make a move soon. We only need to send Tsangzhou spies to secretly cooperate. If we head to Tsangzhou right now, we will definitely leave some traces. However, if someone catches hold of this and accuses him of treason and collusion with the divine province, it will be very unsightly." Arbor sat down next to him in a huff. "Then we can't do anything." "Of course not." A cold glint flitted through Mo Lien's eyes, and he gripped his wife's small paws with a grin. "We can add fuel to the fire. Let them fall into complete chaos." "Your Majesty." Great Eunuch Laifu ran over in a panic, nearly bumping into a floor-to-ceiling screen as he stumbled along the way. "What is it?" The Zhangzhou Emperor looked up with a slightly pale face. Left Prime Minister Wu Yong and General Zhou request an audience. Recently, the Zhangzhou Emperor's health had been deteriorating day by day. It seemed to be an illness that had suddenly broken out. But in fact, the eunuchs and palace maids who were close to His Majesty all knew very well. 2 years ago, His Majesty's health had already deteriorated. He had been injured by the poison a few years ago, and now that this body could no longer suppress it, it suddenly erupted. It was normal for him to faint during the court session. So he didn't have enough time. Zhangzhou's Emperor Rong Yuan coughed lightly and waved his hand. Let them in. Left Prime Minister Wu Yong and Great General Zhou Chao quickly walked in and bowed. Your Majesty. There's an urgent report from the border. The Divine Land has suddenly mobilized 1 million troops and stationed them in the border stronghold of Fengyang City. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor was stunned, and then his eyes widened in disbelief. He knew that if he were to fall ill or even die, someone would definitely make a move. But what he expected was that the Underworld Prefecture would make a move. The surrounding small tribes might want to eat a piece of meat from the Tsang Prefecture and get a share of the profits. But he never expected that the Divine Land would make the first move. Cough, cough, cough. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor's expression suddenly changed and he coughed. Who is it? Is it Mo Lusheng? General Zhou hurriedly shook his head. I heard that the order was given by the Crown Prince of the Divine Land. Recently, the Empress has just woken up, and the Emperor of the Divine Land doesn't have the time to care about other things. The Crown Prince is now handling the court affairs on his behalf. Chapter 3996. This brat is really bold. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor was so angry that he almost couldn't catch his breath and passed out. Your Majesty. General Zhou cupped his fists with a calm face. Please allow this subject to lead the troops to the border of Fengyang City. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor pinched the corners of his eyes tiredly and nodded. Pass down the order. Zhou Chao is to lead 500,000 troops to Fengyang City first. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor suddenly coughed loudly and patted the table beside him. He turned to ask Lai Fu, is Fourth Prince still at Lonely Mountain? Go and summon him back. Reporting, the Imperial Bodyguard led the Featherwood Guard commander and the magistrate in a hurry. Before Lai Fu could report, he hurriedly knelt down and saluted. Reporting to Your Majesty, at 10:00 in the morning today, bandits of unknown origin rushed into Minister Lu's residence and killed everyone on sight. By the time the Featherwood Guard rushed over, all the bandits had already disappeared without a trace. However, the entire Phoenix Emperor City's 4 gates are now under the control of the Featherwood Guard's army. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor was shocked, and his expression instantly changed. Bandits of unknown origin broke into Minister Lu's residence. In broad daylight, right inside the Phoenix the Arch City. Were they so insolent? How could there be such insolent bandits? Who would believe this if they told others about it? Who would think it was normal? The Tsang Prefecture Emperor pursed his lips and said coldly, what's the result of the investigation? The Featherwood Guard commander's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He exchanged glances with the Imperial Capital Magistrate and wiped his sweat at the same time. He said in a low voice, reporting to Your Majesty, the result of the investigation is that the bandits, bang. Rong Yuan casually picked up a jade cup and smashed it at their feet. Everyone was so scared that their faces turned pale and they kept their mouths shut. Bandits, bandits, bandits. Where did these bandits come from? How could they be so bold? Do you really believe what you're saying? The Imperial Capital Magistrate bowed and said while dripping with sweat, Your Majesty, please allow us to report. It's this humble subject and the others who did not do our job well. Please, Your Majesty, give us a few more days. This humble subject and the others will definitely investigate this matter to the end. Just as they were talking, a sharp cry came from outside the palace and entered the palace through the door. A young eunuch came in with a bitter face and reported, "The Empress is outside crying and begging to see His Majesty. Your servants can't stop him at all." The Zhangzhou Emperor's face darkened. "Send the Empress back to the palace first. I'll be there later." After the eunuch left, the crying outside became louder, which annoyed the Zhangzhou Emperor. He rubbed his forehead and said in a tired voice, "Let her in." After a short while, Empress Lu rushed in with a pale face. She immediately prostrated herself on the ground and cried, "Your Majesty, please uphold justice. Prince Chen, Rongli is insane. For the sake of your own selfish desires, you actually destroyed my entire family. I beg your Majesty to uphold justice for this concubine's family." Left Prime Minister Wu Yong said indifferently, "Does the Empress have any basis for her words?" Great General Zhou Chao also nodded. "If you don't have any evidence, it's better not to speak carelessly." "Your Majesty." Empress Lu threw herself in front of the Zhangzhou Emperor and cried with snot and tears, "Your Majesty. Except for Prince Chen, who would do such a crazy thing to the Prime Minister's mansion in the near future?" Empress Lu said angrily, "Your Majesty. I request to punish this evil bandit and bring justice to our Lu family." "Your Majesty, nearly 10,000 refugees have gathered at the city gate and are crying for justice." Chapter 3997. At the same time, a deputy commander of the Featherwood Guard also hurried into the palace, bringing with him a piece of shocking news. The 6 bandits who broke into the Lu estate to commit murder and arson had all surrendered themselves. Empress Lu's vision darkened when she heard this, and her face contorted as she exclaimed, "This Empress wants to see which bandits are so audacious to break into my Prime Minister's estate to commit murder." She was certain that this matter was related to Duanyu. However, those murderous bandits suddenly came to admit their guilt. What exactly was going on? Empress Lu speculated in her mind, but she was troubled by the lack of evidence to accuse Duanyu. It was obvious that this whole thing had been planned from the beginning. From the moment the bandits broke into their Lu estate and slaughtered everyone in their estate to the moment the culprit came out to admit his guilt, the timing of everything was perfect. They stirred up a storm in the entire imperial capital, yet they wanted to calm it down all of a sudden. Who gave you the guts to toy with this Empress like this? Empress Lu's sharp nails dug into her palms, and her eyes revealed a sharp and ruthless glint. Because a large number of refugees had rushed to the capital's city gates, the Tsang province's emperor could only send Wu Yong to investigate. This matter's eruption was strange and bizarre. However, the situation continued to develop in a strange direction, and it wasn't something that she, as the master of the imperial harem, could control. On the second day of the court assembly, several impeachment memorials were presented to the Tsang province's emperor. They were all impeaching Prime Minister Lu's family for seizing land and occupying forests on the outskirts of the capital, causing nearly 10,000 townspeople to become homeless and destitute. Was this matter very strange? Of course it wasn't. Which high official or wealthy merchant in the capital didn't purchase a few farmsteads or fields near the capital's outskirts? However, Prime Minister Lu's family had driven away a large number of residents because of the matter of seizing land. Whether there were nearly 10,000 refugees or not, it was obvious that no one wanted to investigate this specific number. In reality, even if the other officials had also done this kind of immoral thing, they all went with the flow and directly pushed the blame for the nearly 10,000 refugees onto Prime Minister Lu's family. In any case, the dead couldn't testify, right? Could it be that you, Prime Minister Lu, could crawl out of the ground and cry for justice? Impeachment memorials fell on the emperor's desk like snowflakes. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation and criticized Prime Minister Lu's family. They accused the government of forcing the people to rebel, of forcing them to be bandits in the mountains, and of forcing them to kill their entire family in the middle of the night. This was completely because the commoners couldn't live anymore. Therefore, they could only think of such an extreme method. They chose 6 men of sacrifice to kill Prime Minister Lu and his family. Although this matter was full of doubts. For example, why did it erupt so suddenly? How did the tens of thousands of refugees live in the past? Why did they have to choose to expose this matter at this time? What made Empress Lu's vision go dark the most was that the 6 bandits who had pleaded guilty had actually all written confessions and blood letters the night before, and had all committed suicide in the prison. The blood letter was presented to the emperor by a high official of the Ministry of Justice during the morning court session. The great emperor read the bloody letter and scolded the Lu family. After the court, he rushed to the empress' palace and scolded her. Empress Lu didn't sleep last night, and today she was scolded so miserably by the emperor. That night, she was so angry that she couldn't eat a mouthful of food. Imperial noble consort Qing is here. The eunuch's voice made Empress Lu, who was in tears, suddenly stand up from the couch. Chapter 3998. Empress Lu stood so fast that she couldn't help but shake violently. She felt darkness in front of her and almost fell down. The chief maid beside her quickly reached out to support her and said in a trembling voice, "Your Highness." Imperial noble consort Qing walked in gracefully, stroked her slightly bulging belly, and looked at the embarrassed woman in front of her with a faint smile. This lowly medicine woman actually climbed up to the position of imperial noble consort from a small noble lady in just a few months. Now she was really the first person after the empress. Empress Lu wouldn't believe that there was no one who helped her behind the scenes. "Are you here to laugh at me?" "Of course not." Imperial noble consort Qing lowered her eyebrows slightly and looked gentle and graceful. "I heard that something happened in your family. I think you must be suffering these days." "Thinking of the condensed fragrance pill that His Majesty gave me the other day, I specially sent it to you. It can help to refresh your mind and replenish your strength." Empress Lu's face was slightly pale, and she stared at a small box handed over by the maid behind Imperial noble consort Qing. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and slapped the box to the ground. The box fell heavily on the ground with a muffled sound. Imperial noble consort Qing shook her head with a regretful expression. What a good condensed fragrance pill. Just like that, he was ruined by his elder sister. What a pity. Get out. Get out of here. Empress Lu pointed in the direction of the door and scolded harshly. Imperial noble consort Qing bowed slowly inside. "I can understand that you are in a bad mood. Since you want me to leave, I will leave. I just hope you can take good care of yourself." After all, these wonderful days had just begun. Imperial noble consort Qing turned around, and there was a faint cold light in her eyes. "They are all against me, all against me." Empress Lu shrieked and pulled the antique shelf next to her. The dazzling collection of porcelain fell to the ground with a crashing sound. Her prime minister's mansion was gone. The whole Lu family was killed by a group of bandits. Wasn't this a very funny thing? The Lu family was not a small family. There were dozens of god state masters in the Lu family. Just like that, they were all silently killed at home in the wee hours of the morning. How was it possible for a mere 6 bandits to do that? In order to eradicate the Lu clan, they would need at least 100 people to infiltrate the Lu clan and kill them. But she had no evidence, no evidence. The 6 bandits had also left blood letters, saying that they were dead and had taken all the blame. If this matter was handed over to the Ministry of Justice to investigate in detail, they would certainly be able to find more clues to refute the testimony of the 6 bandits. However, as the refugees flooded into the capital, a huge commotion broke out. The officials in the capital were all in danger. From top to bottom, they were all busy thinking of countermeasures to appease the common people. Who would have the time to investigate the matter of her Lu family? Moreover, who was the Lu family? Now, she was like a rat on the street that everyone wanted to beat up. Even the capital made up nursery rhymes, scolding the Lu family for taking advantage of the empress's power and abusing the villagers. They directly scolded Empress Lu as well. Even today, during the morning court session, there were officials who took advantage of the situation and handed the great emperor a memorial to pray for the people to abolish the empress. Empress Lu's eyes were red, and she said harshly, "Go and summon all my secret guards." "Greetings, Your Majesty." Chapter 3999. Go investigate clearly what that punk Prince Chen did these past few days. Empress Lu widened her bloodshot eyes and screamed malevolently like a malicious spirit. Lonely Mountain's imperial mausoleum Duanyu, who was guarding the thatched cottage and accompanying his mother on Lonely Mountain, was dressed in white. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his figure was visibly thinner than a month ago. A shadowy figure followed behind him like a shadow. Duanyu took 2 steps forward and sprayed water with a flower pot. Then, he quickly followed suit. Whenever Duanyu took 2 steps to the side, he would also take 2 steps to the side. He followed closely behind Duanyu. Duanyu was a bit annoyed from following, so he tossed the flower pot aside and turned to look at him. Stay 3 feet away from me." Hidden Guard shook his head vigorously. "Your Highness, you fainted in the inner courtyard 3 days ago. Leader ordered me to stay within 3 steps of you from now on." Duanyu rubbed his forehead and explained patiently, "That was an accident. He really wasn't that weak. It was just that day when he recalled that day's incident, Duanyu's lips couldn't help but sneer. That old man wanted to take over his body while he was feeling down. How could a sparrow occupying a dove's nest be so beautiful? He thought that he blamed himself for being indecisive in the past, which caused the people around him to suffer so much. If he had been ruthless to that woman and killed her from the start, his mother wouldn't have died, and he wouldn't be all alone. So, kindness and whatnot were sometimes unnecessary. It would cause the death of the people closest to you. So that day, when the old man threatened him again, he smiled and started roasting him with silver-white flames. He didn't care that he might be his ancestor, his great-grandfather, someone he had to respect. He only knew that the power of the Devil Emperor was his now. Since he inherited the bloodline of the Devil Emperor, then he had to integrate it into his body and truly transform it into something that belonged to him and could be used by him. So, there was no need for an old man like you to exist anymore. He roasted that old man, but because they were connected by blood, he also suffered greatly. That was why he suddenly fainted in the inner courtyard. He really poked a hornet's nest this time. Little Ku Zi, Yuan Zhen, and the others all thought that he had fainted again due to excessive grief. The secret guards also anxiously followed behind him, not willing to leave him alone. How troublesome. That old man was only half roasted and had not completely melted yet, Your Highness. Dr. Tu, who had hurried over, bowed respectfully to His Highness from afar. She knew that His Highness didn't like people getting too close to him, so she stood far away. There's news. Although he lived on a lonely mountain and spent every day with his mother, he still sent out many spies. He knew very well that Jojo and Mo Yen had returned to the royal school, but he did not know the details. The heavenly elixir store in the Divine Land has sent a letter. There should be a result. Dr. Tu lowered his eyes and passed the letter to the shadow guard. After receiving it, Ing presented it to Duanyu. Duanyu first read what was written on that letter. The poison analysis was detailed and meticulous, so even a layman could understand it at a glance. Then, he poured out a small ring from the envelope. A small white paper floated out, and there was only a line of small words on it, Duanyu, take good care of yourself. There was no signature, but he knew who it was. He picked up the small silver spatial ring and took a deep look at it in the direction of the sunlight. Chapter 4000. So bright. It was as if that beam of sunlight had passed through that tiny ring and directly shot into his heart. The pressing warmth seemed to be able to instantly disperse much of the haze and poisonous miasma. Lonely Mountain was cold all around, but he couldn't feel much coldness right now. Duan Yu gripped that ring with an indifferent expression. Physician 2 eagerly gazed at Duan Yu from afar with a curious and frenzied expression. Master? Give me a definite answer. Duan Yu put away the ring and a small white letter into his sleeve before handing the antidote letter to Ing. Ing returned the letter to Physician Tuesday. Physician 2 quickly skimmed through the letter. After he finished reading, his eyes lit up as he looked at Duan Yu. He couldn't help but sigh. Amazing. You really could tell. Soul-devouring flowers couldn't be considered a poison at all. Some female cultivators even specially used them to concoct perfume. This was because the perfume concocted from the soul-devouring flower was very refreshing and pleasant. Furthermore, it had no side effects on cultivators' bodies. However, just as the letter said, the other party very shrewdly found such a common yet very useful item and specially used it to deal with Her Highness Noble Consort Duan, who was a normal person. It didn't matter how rare or precious the item was. It only mattered that it was useful to a mortal woman. If it weren't for the fact that the pill refiner had a profound understanding of pharmacology and was very proficient in all kinds of medicinal herbs in the world, who would associate it with such a common soul-devouring flower in such a short time? Physician 2 carefully folded the letter and put it into an envelope before respectfully presenting it with both hands. Duan Yu also put the letter into his sleeve before looking at the silent woman standing on the side. Is there anything else? Physician 2 said with a conflicted expression, Master, this subordinate wants to go to the Divine Province's Heavenly Pill Hall to study for a month. In order to stay by Master's side in the future and be able to take better care of him, Tu Xiuxiu felt that her decision was definitely correct. Otherwise, with her current half-baked ability, she might not be able to take care of Master if someone else extended a vicious hand to him. An extremely faint smile appeared on Duan Yu's lips. Go if you want. I'll write a letter for you to bring over. Yes. Tu Xiuxiu nodded solemnly. She cupped her fists and bowed. Thank you for your tolerance, Master. Lil Ku Zi and Aunt Yuanzhen ran over in small, quick steps. After bowing, Xiao Ku Zi panted as he said, Your Highness, the Emperor is urgently summoning you back. A cold and sharp glint flashed through Duan Yu's eyes. He didn't say anything and just nodded his head. Seeing little Ku Zi staring at him blankly, he could not help but say helplessly, Go and pack your luggage. We're going down the mountain this afternoon. Xiao Ku Zi instantly cried tears of joy. He looked at Duan Yu and stammered, Your Highness, is this true? You really must be willing to go down the mountain. All right, this servant will go and prepare. He couldn't be blamed for being stupid, but His Highness was too stubborn. During this period of time, it was unknown how many people had tried to persuade His Highness to leave the mountain. Even left Prime Minister Wu Yong had come to see him once at night. However, he was still unable to persuade His Highness to change his mind. A storm was brewing in the royal court. Due to His Majesty's illness, the second prince and third prince were in a state of chaos. On the other hand, that crown prince appeared to be very calm and never fought with anyone. He hid in the Eastern Palace every day to walk the birds and play with the dogs, living a more carefree life than anyone else. Chapter 4001. She really couldn't figure out what was going on. She kept feeling that His Highness the Crown Prince, Romley, seemed to have suddenly changed his personality. He didn't even fight with the second prince and third prince recently. It seemed like he was cultivating his character. Wasn't this a joke? Your Highness. A black figure flitted across the sky and landed beside Ing. Ing immediately bowed respectfully in greeting. This was the captain of their hidden guards, Yi. He was the leader of the entire hidden guards, and he was also the one who usually dispatched all the hidden guards outside. Now that he suddenly appeared here, he must have something urgent to report to His Highness. Ing retreated a few more steps and sent a look to Yuan Zhen and Xiao Kezi, telling them to retreat as well. The leader of the hidden guards, Yi, took 2 steps forward and whispered to Duanyu, Her Majesty the Empress sent a group of hidden guards to investigate the movements of the people around you. We have also been targeted. Duanyu's lips turned up in a sneer. Then let them investigate. In any case, none of the people around him had moved recently, so what clues could they find? The ones who made the move were all the men that Prince Mo arranged in secret. But speaking of which, this punk he actually left so many hidden guards in Phoenix Emperor City. He was truly wicked, immoral. These hidden guards were originally left in case of an emergency. They were most likely used to deal with his emperor father, Rong Yuan. To think that Prince Mo actually had such great patience. Who knew how many years he had been plotting? So the number of men he left in Phoenix Emperor City was really quite a lot. Duanyu couldn't help but shake his head at this thought. Whoever made an enemy out of Mo Lien would truly have 8 lifetimes of bad luck because this guy was too black-hearted and too scary. If you accidentally offended him, who knew how many traps he would set around you, just waiting for you to foolishly walk right into his trap. It was indeed time to meet that old woman. Duanyu's lips curled up in a cold smile. That afternoon, all the aristocratic families and officials in Song Prefecture's Phoenix Emperor City received the news His Highness Prince Chen had returned to the palace. Mai Qiao's section break, when Mo Lien pushed open the door and entered, she saw her wife drooping on the bed with her eyes half closed. Who knew what she was thinking about? From the looks of it, it was as if he had fallen asleep in the middle of his cultivation and was hanging by the side of the bed. Was that what he was thinking? Although his little wife's cultivation was impermanent, she probably wouldn't do such a strange thing, right? His footsteps were light, but he suddenly stopped and looked at the little guy with a strange expression. At this moment, he was absolutely certain that his wife had fallen asleep. He could even hear the sound of her even breathing. This wasn't even a light sleep. He was half hanging by the side of the bed, in a strange position. He was sound asleep. Wife, you're really capable. She had never seen a cultivator fall asleep while cultivating. The corners of Mo Lien's mouth twitched. He quickened his steps and floated to his baby's side. He half squatted in front of her and looked at her sleeping expressionlessly with her head lowered. Pooh! Mo Lien turned his head and glared at the guy who laughed at his wife. Zhe Chen blinked and poured himself a cup of cold tea. As he drank, he shook his head and said, "This is this noble one's first time seeing someone fall asleep while cultivating in seclusion. What do you know?" Mo Lien reflexively retorted, "Look at my Jojo, even though he's asleep." You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.